Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Chapter 509. Sugar Acquired. Vishna peeked out of the window and waved at his daughter. Vishna, come meet our guests. However, the young woman just looked at her father and shook her head no. Looks like you won't be able to meet my daughter. She's too busy with her training these days. She says that she has to prepare for the auction or else she'll get left behind by the others. Down below, Rina was being thanked by the horned elephant's owner profusely to the point of prostrating in the ground. The elephant itself snuggled up its trunks towards her, as if apologizing for what it had done. Rina made sure that the elephant was okay and that no one was hurt during the incident before leaving the streets. But before she completely left, she looked back at the window where her father was. She recognized the man beside him as Max Vanderbilt. But she didn't recognize the boy that was right next to him. She squinted, trying to observe him more. She didn't know why, but she felt like there was more to this boy than meets the eye. Usually she'll be able to gauge a person's strength just from their posture alone. But this time she couldn't correctly estimate him. I'm overthinking this. He's just a kid, she thought, shaking her head. Back in Vishna's room, Max still couldn't believe that the little girl he saw back then had now grown to become one of the best talents in Metropolis. Congratulations, Vishna. Looks like your company is in good hands. Ha ha ha. Damn right it is. Vishna laughed. Brother, my company is going to be up there with the legacy soon. How about we have a little arrangement, huh? He said, winking. What arrangement? My daughter is already of age. How about we engage your son with my daughter? A union of our families. Vishna laughed and Max awkwardly laughed with him. Knowing Vishna, the guy was probably joking since he knew that Max's son was only a little kid. Still, Max wouldn't be surprised if Vishna asked again once William was grown up. Let's open up a bottle of snake wine and chat like we used to, huh? Vishna offered. Maybe next time, brother. For now, I'd like to discuss business with you. Business? Of course, for my good friend, always. Vishna said, gesturing for them to take a seat in his snake leather couch. I'm here to pay off my debt to you back, Max said. This was also one of the reasons why Max wanted to visit Spice Vice. At his lowest, Vishna always loaned him money whenever he needed it, without question. And even now the man wasn't asking back the money Max owed. And now that the money he lost was returned by the Duchess, he wanted to repay Vishna. My friend, are you sure? I heard that your business hasn't been going well. It's fine if you keep the money for now, Vishna said sincerely. Don't worry. Justice was served. Max told Vishna about their discovery that it was Jack who scammed him out of millions of gold coins. It was that bastard? Vishna harumphed. No wonder we couldn't find him. He was a royal. It's good that your money was returned. Have you finally decided to revive the Vanderbilt business? It's always a shame that a man of your talents was hindered by that bastard scammer. Max shook his head. This business is different. We're looking to buy your sugar. Vishnu nodded and took out a pouch from one of his cabinets by his desk. We have lots of sugar in our inventory. But as you know, the price for this is very high, especially right now when it's not in season. Michael didn't care about the price. He just needed lots of it. How many sacks are you thinking of getting? Vishnu asked. 2 sacks? 5 sacks? We need about 100 kilograms. Vishnu immediately sat up, knocking over the sugar in the pouch. 100 kilograms. Are you sure about this? Yes. 100 kilograms a week. That seemed to have put Vishnu in a coma. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Because of the price, most of his customers only bought sugar a few grams at most. The only ones who bought kilograms of sugar from him were the big companies like the Pyramidic Cuisine and other food-related businesses. You do realize how much that would cost, right? Michael nodded. Yes. Max had just gotten his money back, but Vishnu didn't think he would spend it all on sugar alone. Are you sure this is the right use for your money? What would you even use sugar for? From what I know, the Vanderbilt business does not dabble in the food industry. Oh, I won't be buying it. This is my nephew's business, Max corrected him. Really? Michael boy, are you sure you need all that sugar? Michael nodded and used his shadow skill to transport 3 chests full of coins. They landed on Vishnu's carpet with a thud, the sound of heavy coins clinking around. Vishnu couldn't believe that a boy like him had possession of so much money. This was enough to buy tons and tons of sugar. He thought that the Vanderbilt family was struggling to keep up. But if they were willing to give up this much money for sugar, then everyone's perception of the Vanderbilt business was wrong. They weren't on the downfall. I'm planning on making a soda business. It's kind of like an exotic juice, Michael explained. Vishnu forced himself to calm down. A juice business? The Duchess has strict policies regarding exotic food. They will need verification that it's safe to consume fist before they allow people to sell them. Don't worry. The royal family already gave us their approval, Michael explained. Vishnu felt like he wasn't looking at a kid but an adult instead. He was much better at business than other adults he had been dealing with. Max, who's your nephew? He's a Vanderbilt that came to Metropolis from the King's Region, Max explained. The King's Region? And now you're starting a company here in Metropolis? He asked, incredulous. That's right. He was able to get a permit and everything. As soon as he said that, it was as if a light bulb turned on in Vishnu's head. Wait, I did hear about a new company getting a permit. What's it called? He asked Michael. Reborn. Vishnu's eyes widened. So you were the owner of Reborn? The company that was getting a lot of attention in the festival? I even heard that you won in the low-class tournament. Because a Department of Spice participated in the Upperwood District Festival, Vishnu was very familiar with the commotion that the Reborn company caused during that last day. It was legendary to say the least. He never expected to see that the owner of that company was none other than a Vanderbilt. And a kid at that. Vishnu also leaned on the table, realizing that he was facing the real deal. I'm willing to give you all the sugar you'll need, he promised. But it's going to cost more since it'll be hard to transport that much sugar in a week. Michael smiled. We'll have no problem with that. Chapter 510, Vishnu's Wish. Once his business with Vishnu was sealed, Michael and Max went on their way to the next ingredient needed for the soda business. Meanwhile, Vishnu was left all alone in his room, still reeling from the realization at what he had just witnessed. It was at this moment that the door to his room opened and his daughter came in to give her greetings. Father, you asked for me? Rena said, bowing to his father. Unlike her attire from before that hid most of her features, Rena now wore a traditional silk green dress that accentuated her womanly curves. The thin veil wrapped around her head also gave her a sense of mystery and allure. Why didn't you meet with our guests earlier? Vishnu asked, disappointed. Your godfather Max Vanderbilt came to visit us after all this time. Rena curtsied. Apologies, father. But I have much more important business to attend to. If I don't prepare for the auction, then my rivals can overtake my place. That can't happen. I shall send a letter to Godfather Max giving him my greetings and apologizing for not meeting with him. Vishnu waved his hand. There's no need for that. You'll meet with them soon. Rena looked up at her father, confused. There was a certain smile on his face that she knew meant that he was scheming something. What do you mean, father? I am saying that you will meet the Vanderbilts soon. In the auction, no less. This didn't make sense to Rena. Father, no offense to them, but the Vanderbilts have long lost their stature as part of the legacies. They have even been relegated out of the minor factions. They do not have the sufficient golden 500 ranking to participate in the auction. Vishnu laughed. That was true. But if you had met with them as I did, then you would have realized that their stature would soon change in the coming future. Although Max was her godfather, Rena didn't think that he had the capacity or talent to completely overturn their situation and turn them into a company worthy of joining the auction. I can see what you're thinking, Vishnu laughed. But I'm not talking about your godfather. I'm talking about the boy next to him. The image of a golden-haired boy looking down at her flashed in Rena's mind. Him? Yes, him. In my opinion, the boy has the talent to completely change the course of the Vanderbilts in Metropolis. It won't be long before they have the rankings needed to participate in the auction. Rena showed a look of surprise. Her eyes darted around the room as she began to think of the changes that would happen. Her eyes began to clear and turn into indifference soon after she realized that it wouldn't matter to her. I am happy for them, father. But my focus should be on Bo. If I defeat her in this auction, then I'm confident that we'll be able to overcome the pyramidic cuisine in the rankings soon. This is why I do not have much time for anything else other than training, father. Rena turned around and was ready to leave. I wouldn't be so sure about that, daughter. This boy not only has the potential to enter the auction but also achieve great success in it as well. You may even find yourself on the losing side when confronted with him. This immediately sent a fiery flame of pride in Rena's eyes. She faced her father, almost offended that he would imply that someone else could beat her. Father, have you no trust in your own daughter? The only ones that I have to worry about are the other Rising 6 competitors. But if my preparations go smoothly, then even they are not ready for my performance. Vishnu walked over to his daughter and held her cheeks. Of course I trust you, Rena. But I am simply saying that you should not underestimate that boy. From my estimations, he could become part of the Rising 6 in the near future. This truly surprised Vishnu. Her father's intuition was rarely wrong. It was what helped Spice to become the company that it was now. The fact that he was praising this boy as a near member of the Rising Six meant that he could very well be part of them in the future. Very well, father. I will keep my guard up against him at all times. Or dear daughter, you could do the opposite, Vishna emphasized with a wink. Rena stepped back, looking at her father with confusion. What are you saying? The boy is a Vanderbilt. I have a feeling that the latent genes of the great lion eyes has finally reared its head. It won't be long before his roars will be loud enough to cause reverberations in Metropolis. We could either fight the waves or go along with it. Before Michael and Max left, they gave him a sample of the soda they were going to create. He thought that it was magnificent and had the potential to take Metropolis by storm. But that wasn't all. Michael revealed that he was going to take care of the shipping of the sugar through the trucks. Vishna couldn't believe that Michael owned those vehicles that caused everyone to lose their minds. It was at that point that he realized that Michael was a different breed altogether. He wasn't just a talented boy. He was the talent. That was why Vishna wanted him to become his son-in-law. You're not suggesting what I think you're suggesting, Rena recoiled. Take him as your husband, Rena. This will be good for you and our company. This time Rena finally couldn't take it and stormed out of the room, stomping her feet. She couldn't believe what her own father was suggesting. Think about it, Rena. Her father's voice echoed through the halls, chasing after her. The auction will be a good chance for you to become close with the boy and let him see your beauty. The mere thought angered Rena. First of all, he was just a kid about 13 years old. She was already 18. Secondly, Rena resented the thought that she and their company needed the help of the Vanderbilts. Even if they could regain their esteem in the future, that didn't mean that she needed their help. She was going to get Spice Vice in the major factions all by herself. She didn't need to get engaged to do that. The very reason why she was working hard to improve her strength in the auction was because she wanted to prove to her father that she could finally take over the business. She thought she got her father's approval once she became part of the Rising Six. But it seemed that that wasn't enough. She balled up her fist with nothing but rebellion on her mind. She decided that in this auction she would do her best to prove to her father that she didn't need anyone else to succeed in Metropolis. She was going to defeat this Michael boy and prove to him that she didn't need him or anyone else. Chapter 511, Soda Factory. Michael and Max visited a few other companies in Metropolis in search for the right ingredients for the soda. It took them the whole day, since everyone exhibited the same surprise and shock as Vishna. They all thought that the Vanderbilts had no capacity to buy the bulk amount of materials they were looking for. Of course, all Michael had to do was pay up front, and they quickly changed their tune and processed the sale very easily. They were even so apologetic about their initial offense that they ended up delivering the materials right into Michael's new factory without any fees at all. Because of this, the production of the soda was finally on its way. At this point, the other Vanderbilts had gotten a satisfactory level of mastery over the controls over the big machines. The engineers designed it so that they were user-friendly, so it was intuitively easy to learn. They would be able to keep the factory running day to day without much trouble. Good morning, everyone, Michael said as he stood in front of the group of the Vanderbilt workers. As you can see behind me, these are the materials that you are going to be working with. If you need sugar for the mixture, you take it from that large chest over there. He pointed at the barrels of sugar that Vishna provided for him. That much? That must have cost a fortune. I didn't think that we'll be using premium ingredients for this drink. Nephew Michael, how are you able to afford all this stuff? Michael shrugged. My company is doing well in the King's region, so I'm not tight on budget. They all nodded to themselves, proud of their relative that he was able to accomplish this much. In fact, they praised his bravery. The fact that he was willing to risk his savings to build up a new business in Metropolis meant that he had nerves of steel that weren't fazed by the unknown. We'll make sure not to waste a single ingredient, Michael. Yeah. We mastered these metal machines enough to make sure that we'll have 100% efficiency. We'll make sure you won't get bankrupt. They all rallied with a cheer, which added to their motivation for working hard. Michael awkwardly scratched his chin. Do they think this is all I can afford? He thought to himself. Ahem. Anyway, for the first few weeks we'll be producing only less than 10,000 bottles a month. But after that we'll probably be ramping up production even more. I've already planned for an expansion for the factory. Don't be surprised if we produce 100,000 bottles a day in the near future. Everyone's jaws were on the floor. 100,000 bottles a month. This meant that they would need 10,000 times more materials than right now. They couldn't fathom the price that those ingredients would cost. Not only that, but Michael told them that this expansion was set. He was going to ramp up the production of the soda no matter if soda was a success or not. They didn't know if Michael was simply that confident in his product or he had a lot of money to spare. Are you sure? Why don't we just wait a bit before increasing the number of bottles we produce? Yeah, if we see that it's selling well, we'll increase it little by little. Max, why don't you advise our nephew so that he doesn't waste his money? They all turned to Max. After all, his impatience was what ultimately led the Vanderbilt business to almost go bankrupt. They didn't want Michael to repeat the same mistakes he had. However, Max just raised his hands, choosing not to interfere. Just like them, he thought that Michael was just a talented budding young businessman with a lot of ideas and products to sell. But as he got to know more about Michael, he began piecing together some bits and pieces of the truth. The automobiles, the 8 elemental mastery talent, the endless amount of money, and most of all the rumored nation of Reborn that he overheard Bart and Lilia talking about. If he came from the King's region all the way to Metropolis, then it could only mean that he had already conquered it with his company. Michael didn't say it outright to him. He didn't have to. He just let his indifference to spending a lot of money talk for itself. Michael wasn't a rising star. He was already blazing through the skies. However, his initial brilliance was only seen on the other side of the world, which was why most if not all of Metropolis knew nothing about Michael. However, Max knew that it was only a matter of time before Metropolis caught up with Michael's brilliance. Guys, trust Michael. He knows what he's doing. Even if he wastes 100,000 bottles of soda, it won't make a dent on his pockets. The other Vanderbilts were speechless. They looked at Michael, who was silent and didn't deny the claim. It was at that moment that they finally realized how much they didn't know about Michael. Just how rich was he? The soda factory finally started its production. The sounds of heavy metal pounding into another metal resounded through the walls, the scent of bubbling soda wafted through the air and out the vents. And most of all, the feeling of that satisfying pop echoed as the caps were installed inside the glass bottles. The Vanderbilts manually loaded the soda bottles onto the crates and stacked them on top of each other. By the end of the day, there were almost 1,000 bottles of soda produced in the factory. This would be enough for the opening day tomorrow. He thanked the Vanderbilts for their efforts before they all went on their way back to their estate. And just as Michael was about to leave, he heard the sounds of hooves clacking on stone slabs echoing through the streets. He looked at the corner and saw a single horse rider wearing a uniform of white and gold. He recognized him as the royal man who brought them into the Duchess' palace the other day. "Greetings, Sir Michael." The man got off of his horse and bowed at Michael. He then took out a scroll from his pockets and began reading it out loud. "On behalf of the royal family, dearest, congratulations to the successful production of your magnificent soda. The royal twins would like you to know that they would be visiting your establishment early in the morning to be your very first customers. They hoped that you made enough soda to fill an ocean." Michael chuckled to himself. "Tell them I'm thankful for their support. The taste for the soda will be different from the usual, but I know that they'll like it too." The royal man nodded. "Very well, there is just one question left, and it is from the Duchess herself. What is the name of your soda product?" Michael thought about it long and hard. Eventually he came up with something that was still branded to the Reborn name while also fitting for a soft drink. Rebirth Dew. Chapter 512. Commotion in the Palace. Deep in the night, just a few hours before Michael finally opened his soda business now called Rebirth Dew, something was stirring inside the Duchess' castle. The usually calm night of Metropolis was now replaced by frantic running and shouting from the guards. Even when it was time for the horses to go to sleep, there were still carriages coming in and out of the castle plateau as if something big was occurring in the palace. The Duchess' Secret Service tried their hardest to keep the noise to a minimum. They deployed all sorts of illusions within the castle walls, intending to obscure anyone from peering through. Meanwhile, the innocent civilians who were awoken from the sounds of soldiers marching in the night were given the excuse that it was simply a military exercise. But of course, some of the eagle-eyed members of Metropolis were able to see from far away that something big was happening inside the royal walls. Alaric looked out of his window towards the castle in the distance. His eyes were piercing yet gentle, confused yet discerning. "What do you think it means?" Perseus asked from the corner of the room. As expected of Alaric's right-handman, he was immediately alerted of what was happening. "The soldiers are deployed. Do you think the Duchess was attacked or something?" Alaric shook his head. "No. If the Duchess' life was in danger, bells would be ringing and the royal family would ask for help from the other major factions. This is different. It looks like they're caught off guard and are trying to catch up. They're in a hurry. As for what, I don't know." Perseus nodded. "I'll have our informants try to find out as much as we can." Meanwhile, inside the magic tower, the wizards of the Guild of Arcana were once again gathered at the top floor to have an emergency meeting. This time, though, it wasn't about a supremely talented boy who was full of surprises. This time they were talking about the abnormal movement in the Duchess' palace. Such a large illusion spell around the castle walls was easily discernible to the likes of these senior wizards. "Tower Master, should we send a representative to the royal family? We should have the proper authority to have them tell us the truth." The Tower Master shook his head. "If they wanted us there, they would have called us first. If they wanted complete and total privacy, they would have asked me to create their illusion spell. We wouldn't even be talking about a commotion right now if I did it. The fact that they didn't ask for me means that the matter is of extreme secrecy that even I am not privy to." The other mages turned silent. They could use their magic to peer through the veil and find out the truth through brute force, but that would sully their relationship with the Duchess. It was not worth it. I have a feeling that we'll find out about it soon enough, the Tower Master said, closing his eyes. It was at that moment that the door to their room burst open and another senior member of the wizard group came inside in a haste. There's been a development, Tower Master. The spell that you cast all over Metropolis worked. We were able to see other abnormalities in movement. And? The exhausted wizard gulped. It seems that Barnaby Stinson was personally asked by the Duchess to visit her castle at this very moment. He is on the way there now as we speak, guarded by her secret service. The Tower Master leaned on the table with his hands clasped together in thought. This is about the auction, he realized. The Duchess worked so hard to keep the commotion a secret that even the Magic Tower was not given any information. Yet Barnaby was invited inside. This was no coincidence given that the auction was only a few weeks away from happening. On the other side of the castle, the knightly court experienced a similar explosion of activity as the Magic Tower. The senior knights were immediately alerted from the sound of soldiers marching deep into the night. They awoke and immediately reported to their superiors' quarters. If there was anyone who knew what was happening, then it would be Kruger, the Heavenly Knight. However, no matter how many times they knocked on his door, no one answered. Eventually they forced themselves inside and found no one around. Kruger was gone. Immediately they knew that Kruger had gone to figure out what was happening by himself. And it wasn't until half an hour later that the knights felt the reassuring presence of the Heavenly Knight appear right back in his quarters. They entered his abode, seeing him standing by the window. Sire Kruger, our knights and squires have been scrambling to find more information about the commotion. We need your direction, sire. Kruger nodded. Do not worry. I only left because I finally felt their presence in the royal continent. They, sire? The foreigners, Kruger clarified. I felt the beat of the wyvern's wings touch down upon our soil. They have arrived. Meanwhile, back in their headquarters in Main Street, Michael was sleeping peacefully when all of a sudden he felt a heavy object bounce on his chest. Master! Master! He opened his eyes and saw Fudge in his rogue ninja attire bouncing on his chest and trying hard to wake him up. Fudge looked like he was dying to tell him something. What's wrong? Master! I just found out some really bad news. Michael sat up. What is it? I was just doing my business, surveying Metropolis, when all of a sudden I heard soldiers and guards marching in the Duchess' palace. Master, I know that I wasn't supposed to be spying on them, but I couldn't help it. I also saw Barnaby there, so I went into his shadow and eavesdropped on their conversation. Michael used his supreme skill and was able to see the large illusion spell on the castle itself. It was actually an 8-star spell, which would have fooled most people. With how much the Duchess was trying to hide it, he was actually surprised that Fudge was able to eavesdrop on their conversation without being caught by her secret service. What did they talk about? The Duchess said that some of the tourists arrived here ahead of schedule, and that they have decided to participate in Barnaby's auction. Because of that, Barnaby was pressured by the Duchess to hold the auction earlier than expected. Michael frowned. This wasn't good because he still hadn't got the ranking needed to enter the auction. It's okay, Michael consoled himself. My estimation for our sales will give us enough sales to increase the ranking. The best case scenario was that the auction would be held a week from now. He was confident his soda would catch on with the general public. As for the worst case scenario, he didn't want to think of it. He had a bad feeling. When? Fudge then jumped on top of his head. At the same time that the Duchess guests will arrive. Tonight. Chapter 513. Day Rush. Early in the morning, before the sun had even risen, Michael had Jimmy and the rest of his crew come down to his room to discuss their current situation. Of course, he told them about the dire situation that they were in. What is the ranking we need to participate in the auction? Jimmy stifled a yawn and muttered, at least in the top 400. Now, in Jimmy's opinion, the Reborn company was already in the top 400 of the rankings. However, the Daily Metro, the newspaper company who decides the ranking for the Golden 500, refused to accept his articles about the Reborn company's feats in the King's region. I've asked around and was able to find out that the 400th company is able to accomplish about 5,000 sales in a day. I think that as long as we surpass that sale, I'll be able to prove to the Daily Metro that we can get that 400th spot. Castell looked at the papers in her folder and spoke up. If it's just 5,000 sales in a day, then we already accomplished that. Reborn is still popular in the Upperwood district because of the festival. Once we announce to them that we've opened our doors, we can expect double that amount in half a day. Jimmy shook his head. I'm afraid that's not going to work. We only have one day, scratch that, we only have about 18 hours to get that ranking. If we're given enough time, then I can easily convince the Daily Metro to give us the appropriate ranking. But if we demand them to change our rankings within a few hours, we'll really have to show them that we deserve that spot without a shadow of a doubt. If we just do the bare minimum, they won't accept it. We need to make a splash. We need to blow our competition out of the water so much so that they'll be forced to give us that ranking. Michael only had one day to reach that goal. He would have been very confident if he had a week to do it. Even 3 days was very much doable. However, just one day to do it would be at the very limit of what was even possible. The problem was not the products. It was proven time and time again that once people tasted it, then they would be willing to purchase it again. The problem was the fact that the Reborn company was still unknown. Lord Michael, it may be crass, but we can use the shadow orcs to try and manipulate customers to try out our products. It'll solve our problems very easily, Shiina suggested. That was also Michael's first idea. But of course it was just an idea. He wouldn't actually do it because it was unethical. Thankfully, Jimmy's words gave him an idea. Jimmy, do you know who the Rising Six are? The rookie Rebornian journalist nodded his head fervently. Yeah, I know them. They're practically the talk of the town constantly, especially during these past few days. They're all busy making moves and preparing for the auction. They're popular, right? Michael asked, a smile forming on his face. Would you say that defeating them in sales would be enough of a splash to get us that ranking? Jimmy stood up, shocked at what Michael suggested. What are you planning? We'll compete with one of them head-to-head in a battle of sales. Once we have proof that we bested them in number of sales, then the Daily Metro would be forced to give us that ranking, correct? Yes, but... Jimmy was speechless. Sir Jimmy, who is the weakest among the Rising Six? Castell asked. Young master, I think we have to target the weakest to prove our ranking. Jimmy loosened his tie, exasperated. They are all pretty equal in strength. But in business terms, if you had to pick the weakest, then I think that it's Rena from her Department of Spice and Vice. Though she has recently shown that she can improve in her rankings. Who's the strongest? Michael asked. Right now it's Beauregard from the Pyramidic Cuisine. She is a tremendous chef that showed great ingenuity and skill. All of her new drinks and food items are always sold out. Michael smiled, almost chuckling. She sells drinks? Then it's decided. We'll target her. Jimmy almost couldn't believe what Michael was saying. It was as if he didn't want to succeed in the rankings. Really? If we target her, then we'll only make it harder on ourselves. Jimmy shouted, almost begging Michael to reconsider. You said it yourself. We need to make a big splash. And what bigger splash can we make if it's not defeating the top one of the Rising Six? Jimmy didn't think that Michael would come up with such a plan. It was crazy because the Rising Six were considered the best new talents of this generation. Their names were well established in Metropolis, meaning they already had a high base for sales in the first place. This was especially so for Beauregard. But for Michael, he knew that this was the only solution to their problem. He knew that his soda would be able to defeat any kind of juice or food that Beau could come up with. Just the mere novelty of it would allow Reborn to reach a peak that would surpass them, even if it's just for a day. And he was going to butt heads with the Rising Six sooner or later. This was just the perfect timing to do so. All right, Jimmy said, holding his hands up. I've known you long enough to know to not bet against you. Thanks. I'll take count of all the sales you'll get, and as soon as we hit our mark, I'll run directly to the Daily Metro and apply for a change in ranking, Jimmy promised. Shiina got up from her seat. Lord Michael, our inventory for the soda only has 1,000 bottles. Would you like me to arrange for more to be made? As expected of Shiina, she knew just what to do even without him saying it. Yes. I'll do it myself if I have to. Shiina immediately ran out of the room to notify the factory of the change. Meanwhile, Shiina worked with Jimmy to find out more about Beau and her company. Young master, it looks like they're operating in the entertainment district just beside the opera house, she reported. She is currently presenting her signature meal. Terracotta meat and mud juice. Michael already thought of a way to do it. We'll have people stand in the streets offering them the soda. There's a lot of people walking around the entertainment district, which means that they'll get thirsty easily. He also banked on the fact that the guests of the opera house and other entertainment shows would be more than willing to try out something new just like the soda. After a few hours, the sun had already broken through the skies and the day had finally started. It took them some more time to produce more glass bottles, but with Michael's magic, they were able to rush it more than normal. Chapter 514. Entertainment District. For the ordinary citizens of Metropolis, today was just like any other day. But for the companies aiming to participate in the auction, they were all currently embroiled in a huge rush to finish their preparations as fast as possible. The major factions as well as some of the minor factions were able to get a hold of the information much faster than the others. Because of that, they were able to prepare for the auction despite the short notice. By morning, they were all ready for the night to come and the auction to start. Michael was also able to prepare enough soda bottles because he was given the information so early. He wanted to thank Fudge, but he didn't want the slime to get used to always snooping around where he shouldn't be. Anyways, he gathered up all the talented salespeople from the nation of Reborn and transported them to Metropolis just for this specific mission. Without them, it would be hard for the unknown soda to catch on with the general public. He went with them to the entertainment district where no carriages or horses were allowed. It was a wide pathway designed only for the enormous amount of people to go through. As they entered the district, he could immediately hear the sounds of horns blasting rhythmic music to the beat. He looked to the source of the sound and saw it coming from a live band playing in a restaurant. It would have been soothing to hear if they were just one band playing. However, there was an entire street that was just full of restaurants who had their own live band playing music, making the overall sounds they made seem discordant. It was chaos. On the left side were the retail shops, restaurants, taverns, bars, and other kinds of establishments. It lived up to the name Entertainment District because all the people here looked like they were thoroughly entertained. There were some people already drunk, tripping on their own feet in the road despite it being so early in the morning. On the left side, however, was the complete opposite. These rows of establishments were reserved for theaters and shows that were meant for high-class clientele. If the left side were filled with ordinary people having fun eating, drinking, then the right side were filled with these snobby-looking, well-dressed men and women who were on their way to nourish their minds and souls through watching people perform stories in person. Master Beau's restaurant is right over there. Fudge's voice echoed beneath his feet, pointing him in the right direction. But even if Fudge hadn't told him, it was easy to guess. At the very end of the entertainment district, there was this large fancy restaurant 3 floors high that glowed even in daylight. They were the only restaurant that had the capacity to hire mages to constantly have lights on their establishment. This was the premier destination for anyone who wanted to have a fine dining experience. All those high-class people who just finished watching the theater of the opera would only choose to dine in this specific restaurant. After all, this was one of the main branches of the pyramidic cuisine. Not only that, but it was personally resided by the famous Beau Regaud, the proclaimed best of the Rising Six. Everyone wanted to eat what she was cooking. But of course not just anyone can reserve a seat inside. Michael and the other Rebornians positioned themselves at the very opposite side of Beau's restaurant. This place was actually abandoned. But of course this gave Michael the perfect opportunity to set up his stall. "Ready the bottles," he said to the Rebornians. These salespeople wore a cylindrical metal container on their backs with a tube that connected from the bottom of the tank to their hands. After finishing their preparations, the 6 Rebornians set off into the streets and began to approach anyone they could see. "Hello, good sir. Would you like to feel a new sensation? It's a soda called Rebirth Dew," said the Rebornian as he presented a random male citizen the glass bottle. The man looked intrigued at the strange container as well as the eye-catching graphic pasted on the side. However, he was completely unfamiliar with the drink. I don't know. Is that even drinkable? It's dark brown." The Rebornian didn't get discouraged. He smiled and presented the man with a wooden cup. "Would you like to try it out, sir? A free sample." He used the tube and poured a small bit of soda onto the wooden cup for the man to see. "You know what, I'm kinda thirsty after all that walking. But I want something cold. That looks hot since it's bubbling." The Rebornian smiled and pushed the wooden cup to him. "Try it out, sir. It's cold." The man eventually accepted the free sample. He then took a small sip just to taste it. And as soon as he felt that fizzy sensation in his mouth, the man was hooked. "What is this? I've never felt like this before." The man finished the free sample and downed it in one go. "Ah, that's good. I want more." The Rebornian then offered him a glass. "Here it is, sir. Thank you for purchasing." The man's gasp actually caused a few more passers-by to become curious with the drink. And of course the Rebornians gave them a free sample to taste, and just like before, they too were hooked once they felt that fizzy sensation in their mouth. It wasn't long before they had 20 sales in just about 20 minutes. It was like a domino effect. The first few minutes of them selling the soda were slow. However, as more and more got a taste of it, they were enamored with its taste and wanted to purchase it themselves. Eventually a crowd had gathered around the Rebornian salespeople, all wanting a free sample. And just like that, Michael's business was on par, if not better, than the restaurants that were in the entertainment district. But despite this, Michael didn't celebrate just yet. By his estimations, they still wouldn't be able to meet the criteria for getting the rank upgrade. He had been keeping tally, and Beau's restaurant was still getting more customers than him by the minute. This isn't good. Although the growth of the soda customers is good, it just isn't enough if he wanted to beat the best of the Rising Six. He noticed that despite getting a lot of attention from the left side of the district, there was absolutely no one coming from the right side to at least sample his soda. The classy, high-class clientele refused to sample something that they knew nothing about. "Sir, would you like a sample?" asked the Rebornian. "Sorry, no. I don't want to ruin my appetite. I want my taste buds to be ready for Beau's terracotta meat and mud juice." Michael realized that they were the key to his victory. Beau's restaurant only accepted high-class clientele. Meanwhile, his soda only attracted the normal working-class people. If he wanted to defeat Beau, he had to attract both customers. Just then Michael realized that the answer was staring right in his face all along. "I forgot to tell them I changed my venue." Michael chuckled to himself. They were the key to his victory. Chapter 5:15, So Delicious. Half an hour later, the entertainment district experienced a disturbance as a white and gold carriage pulled by 2 stallions passed through the no-vehicle streets. Many people were about to complain and flag down the carriage, but as they approached, they saw the emblem carved on the very side of the carriage door. "Wait! That's the royal emblem. That means one of the royals is inside that carriage." "Who?" I can't see. Where are they even going? Ordinary people were astounded once they realized that they were about to lay eyes on one of the royals. Even as citizens of Metropolis, almost all of the normal population never even met or saw the royals aside from parades that only happen very rarely and only on special occasions. They must be going to the pyramidic cuisine. I heard that Beauregard is cooking one of her specialty dishes. They must be here to taste one of her meals. As expected from the top of the rising six. Only she can attract the eyes of the royals. As the royal carriage trotted through the streets, almost all of the people crowded behind it, hoping to have a peek at the royals once they disembarked. Eventually the carriage stopped just at the end of the district, which was where Beau's restaurant was located. Many people expected this, with some trying to get ahead of other people to get inside the restaurant and have a chance to dine with the royals. Finally the driver got out of his seat and opened the door for the royals. Everyone saw a pink pointed shoe peek out of the door before a woman wearing an elegant yet stylish dress walked out with the help of the driver. Everyone gasped as they saw the beauty held on her face. It's Princess Elizabeth. She's with her husband and kids. Right after her, her two boys eagerly jumped out and held the hands of their mother. Elizabeth's husband got out of the carriage and closed the door behind him. Meanwhile, the driver walked to the other side of the carriage and opened its doors as well. This time a handsome face in princely attire and well-jeweled hair walked down carrying his two daughters in his hands. His wife followed behind him wearing a mostly similar dress to Elizabeth but with less frills and less eye-catching. It's Prince Harry with his wife and his children. Everyone gasped. The royal twins and their children never usually got out of their castle. This was the first time anyone had ever seen the Duchess' grandchildren at all. Beau's dishes must be so good if she could even lure the royal family out of their castle. Damn. I wish I had my reservation for the restaurant today. I'm so jealous they got to eat with the royals. Many people, mostly the fancy and rich citizens, wanted to approach the royals so that they could increase their social standings in Metropolis. Thankfully though, guards with full metal attire formed a wall around the royal family so that no one could approach them with ill intentions. Are you ready, kids? Elizabeth asked her sons. Yes, Mom. Soda. Soda. I want some soda. Oh, he's right over there, Prince Harry said as he looked at the sidewalk and saw a familiar golden-haired boy waving back at him. Come on, girls. Let's greet him. The royal family started to walk through the streets. The attendant on the pyramidic cuisine hurriedly fixed his tie and straightened his jacket. The royal family had no reservations for today, but he had no trouble squeezing them in. No one would complain since they were the royals. He even alerted the chefs to prepare something nice for their arrival. Welcome to the pyramidic chui. But much to everyone's surprise, the royal family kept walking and ignored the warm welcome of the restaurant's attendant. Even the crowd were caught off guard. Huh? I thought they were dining in the pyramidic cuisine. Maybe they want to walk around first? Where are they going? There's no restaurant there. Eventually the royal family stopped at a small wooden stall right on the sidewalk. Nobody even thought that this was their goal all along. It was only when Prince Harry held out his hands and shook hands with the golden-haired boy did the crowd finally realize the truth. They weren't here for the pyramidic cuisine at all. Michael, it's great to see you again. We would have gotten here sooner if not for... You know, Prince Harry said apologetically. People gasped once they saw the prince bow toward someone. And not just anyone. An unknown boy. Our mother is incredibly busy today. If not for that, I'm sure she would have showed up as well, Elizabeth said. Thankfully not a lot of people could hear her words. If so, then there would be people passing out on the streets from sheer shock. That's fine. I totally get it. In fact, I'm even surprised that you made it. I didn't think this would be so important that you'll take the time out of your busy schedule to see me. The royal twins must have been dealing with a lot of contracts and meetings as well because of the auction and the tourists. Yet they still arrived nonetheless. When Michael sent them a message via Fudge, he expected them to reject it. He was even getting ready to execute Plan B to get enough sales for the day. Thankfully, he didn't have to. Boss Michael. One soda, please, said one of the boys. Me too, boss. We did good. We focused on our studies like you said. One of Harry's daughters proudly said. Ha ha ha, that's the reason, Michael. As you can see, our children have been behaving very well because of you, the prince said, patting his daughters' heads. Princess Elizabeth also warmly looked at her children. They've been doing their chores, their etiquette studies, and everything else. It would be a disservice to their work if we didn't give them their reward after all that. Michael chuckled to himself. He didn't want to tell them that the children were experiencing Pavlovian conditioning. Well, feast on our new soda, Rebirth Dew, or you can just call it RD soda if you'd like. He picked 4 glass bottles out of the crate and gave one to each child. They looked at the strange bottle, unable to see how they could drink from it. One of them even tried to use his teeth to pry the cap open. Here, he said, taking one of the bottles. You use this and you... Pop! Smoke rose out of the bottle accompanied by the sound of sizzling liquid. Wow. Cool. Mine next. Mine next. He opened their bottles one by one, allowing them to finally have a taste. As soon as they tasted it, their eyes widened. This is so much better than the one before. Hee. This is my new favorite drink. The children happily chugged the soda bottles, becoming too excited that some of the soda leaked out of the bottle and stained their shirts. They didn't care though and kept drinking. Oh boys. Didn't I tell you to be careful drinking? Elizabeth scolded them. Mom, you've got to try this. Chapter 5:16. Soda for the Royals. Prince Harry and Princess Elizabeth ended up taking a glass of RD soda as well after seeing their children loving the drink. And just like them, the royal twins loved the drink so much that they ended up spilling some of their drink onto their clothes. Ha ha ha. Mom, you're doing it as well. Elizabeth's cheeks flushed as she hurriedly wiped the soda from her mouth. Ahem, now children, that was not good etiquette. Burp. After drinking that much soda in one gulp, Elizabeth belched out a very satisfying burp, surprising everyone and even herself. Oh dearie me. Right next to her, Prince Harry coughed slightly before copying exactly what his twin sister did. Burp. Seeing their parents burp loudly like that made their children laugh out loud. They laughed so much that they ended up burping a lot as well. Burp. 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 A mixture of laughter and burping echoed out through the silent entertainment district. Even the musicians that were playing in the restaurants couldn't help but stop their music and peer out into what was happening in the royal family. The royal family, who were renowned for their manners, style, and grace, were now burping constantly yet still having fun without any care in the world. Gone was their stuck-upness. They were just in the streets as a family, experiencing something new and enjoying it. They're just like us. I didn't know royals could laugh like that. I burp a lot too. It makes me feel good knowing even they do it too. Everyone's perception of the royals changed instantly, for the better. They weren't these untouchable beings that were different from normal people. They were just like any other family. This embarrassing moment made them much more relatable and therefore more likable. Those that disliked the royal family for their elitism couldn't help but renew their opinions of them. They weren't pretentious or egotistical as they first thought. And because they were likable, many people wanted to become like them, or at the very least do what they did. Their influence as the royal family led them to become sort of like influencers from Michael's previous world. Anything that they did, the public wanted to do as well. What are they drinking? That drink must be something special. This must have been why they visited this district in the first place. I want to drink it too. I want to burp like them. Somehow burping became cool. It was the new trend. And because of that, many people eyed Michael's soda bottles like they were made out of gold. They couldn't wait to purchase one for themselves. And the fact that they could only see about 100 bottles or so made them think that it was a limited quantity. This drove their desire to get the soda even more than before. However, the royal family was positioned at the stall, meaning they couldn't approach the owner to buy some soda. And it was at this moment that the Rebornian salespeople came in. They struck while the iron was hot. RD soda here. Come get your own bottles. Free sample for everyone. Does anyone want some RD soda? Come and drink what the royals are drinking. Everyone quickly turned towards the 5 Rebornians with hunger in their eyes. Me. I want one. One. Give me 5. Me too. Me too. Hey, don't be greedy. Save some for the rest of us. Those that were closest to the salespeople immediately shouted out their order. And as expected of a professional, the Rebornians multitasked very easily. They took everyone's order, memorized them, got their payment, and gave them change, all while 100 people were shouting at them and crowding around them. To fulfill everyone's order, they reached down into their shadows and took out the appropriate number of RD soda bottles to their customers. This was possible because their shadows were inhabited by the shadow orcs, who acted sort of like a spatial inventory for them. The entertainment district became like a wet public market with all the screaming and pushing from the crowd. Their customers had now tripled or quadrupled what they were getting before. And it was only growing more and more as people began to find out that the royals drank RD soda. This time Michael's customers weren't just the normal ordinary citizens. He was even getting the attention of the high-class and rich clientele that only the pyramidic cuisine could get. If the RD soda was good enough for the royals, then it was good enough for them too. They used to treat RD soda as a low-class refreshment and didn't give it a second look, but now they treat it as exotic and hip. It won't be long before it becomes the rage in the upper-class circles. And this sudden burst in popularity was all what Michael needed. Once more and more people got a taste of soda, the more people realized that this was a completely new taste and experience. They were curious because of the royals. They stayed because of the taste. Harry approached Michael and gave him a pat on the back. Congratulations on the success. It's all thanks to you guys, he said genuinely. Elizabeth shook her head and disagreed. Your products are already good. It would have done well regardless if we were here or not. Still, as thanks to you, I'll send you guys 10 crates of soda bottles for free. The children cheered and celebrated like they had just won the war. Of course, he had to remind them to keep studying or else he wouldn't be sending them more soda in the future. We promise, Boss Michael. After that, the royal family went back to their carriage and set off back to their castle with the children peeking out of the windows and waving their goodbyes at Michael. Even after the royals bid their goodbyes to Michael, people still came into his stall to purchase the rumored RD soda. He actually sold more bottles after the royals left. It wasn't long after that did they finally reach their goal mark. 10,000 soda bottles sold in only 12 hours. And half of those hours were before the royals showed up. He had also been counting the sales that the pyramidic cuisine made throughout the day, and he estimated that they made about 8,200 sales. He beat them, fair and square. And if he had more bottles of soda ready, then they would have definitely sold more. Either way, Michael was happy that they got what they needed. And once he presented the sales number to Jimmy, the rookie journalist couldn't believe the news. "This is so good," he exclaimed. "This is enough evidence to say that Reborn deserves a rank in the top 400s. The fact that the royals showed up will give us even more credibility. Don't worry, I'll get us that ranking." Jimmy immediately went over to the Daily Metro to report the sales that Reborn just accomplished during the day. As he entered their premises, he saw a lot of people running all over the place. Many of them were rushing to deliver articles after articles with many revisions in its publication. He then looked at the very end of the office where the head editor was located. Chapter 517, Report to the Daily Metro. One of the head editors of the Daily Metro sat at his desk and grabbed his short pepper hair with such force and grip that one would think he wanted to go bald before he turned the age of 40. His head was currently filled with numerous thoughts, alarm bells, and shouting as he tried to keep up with the insane schedule they had today. Knock, knock, knock. He turned to the door with a glare. He told his people not to bother him once he was inside. "What is it?" he asked grumpily. His secretary peeked out of his door and meekly showed a gentle smile. "Sir Kronk, there's a Jimmy here to see you about a company rank upgrade." Before she even finished her sentence, Kronk had already waved her off. He didn't have time to go through all the hoops of a rank upgrade at this moment. After all, it would be an understatement to say that the Daily Metro was currently experiencing an extreme rush to push out newspapers as fast as possible, as if their very life depended on it. Today was just too eventful for them to catch up. Early in the morning, Kronk was awoken by one of his informants that the Duchess was currently embroiled in something big. As a journalist and an editor for a newspaper company, of course, he was going to try and be the first one to cover this story. Unfortunately, though, the Duchess' security was far too strict for them to get any information. Because of this, Kronk was up very early in the morning, having not even slept a single hour, trying to wait for more information. However, that information only came when the sun was already peeking out of the clouds and the day had fully started. After the day started, the Duchess finally took off the illusion curtain that covered her castle and finally allowed reporters from the Daily Metro to learn about the sudden change in the auction schedule. And just like most companies who only heard about this news right after they just awakened, he and the entire Daily Metro rushed to get out an article as fast as possible. Sleep deprived and on a time limit, Kronk forced his journalists to write articles upon articles covering this story. He wanted to find out everything before writing the front page news that would be sent out throughout Metropolis. And although all of them were rushed, somehow they were able to make a decent enough newspaper article regarding this day. However, just when Kronk thought it was over, he was suddenly informed that a new development took place in the entertainment district. In the midst of the upcoming auction, the tourists and everything that came with it, the royal twins and their children decided to go out of their castle and visit an unknown establishment in a far-off district. And that wasn't all. There were rumors that they drank some unknown liquid refreshment that made them burp out loud, which some would say was unbecoming of someone from their stature. Yet from what he could tell, there were only positive reactions from it. This was almost front-page news worthy. Kronk knew that there was more to this story that people didn't know about. The royal twins didn't just stumble upon this thing called RD soda. It was their sole purpose in coming to the entertainment district. The fact that they went back to their castle after having a drink was proof of that. This meant that the one who owned that soda had a pre-existing relationship with the royals. However, when they tried to find out more about this, they couldn't find anything about a permit for this soda. Could this be another case of automatic approval like those vehicles? Kronk thought, not knowing that both were from the same company. "Sir, the guy is insisting that he needs to see you." His secretary peeked back inside. "Tell him I'm sorry, but I can't give him any time to talk unless he has some kind of information about the soda." The secretary opened the door, allowing Kronk to see Jimmy sitting outside. "Sir, he says that he knows all about the soda." Kronk stood up, his cigar falling out of his hands. "Send him here." Jimmy immediately walked inside, carrying a bunch of parchment paper at his side. "You know about this RD soda?" Kronk asked, readying his quill and ink. Now that Jimmy was closer, Kronk realized that he had seen this guy before. "Wait, weren't you the guy who requested a company upgrade of an unknown company from the King's region?" He remembered he turned down Jimmy because the articles he wrote about this Reborn company sounded far too far-fetched. Not only that, but in his opinion, success in the King's region didn't count. "Yep, that's me." Jimmy nodded. "That's the reason why I wanted to speak with you. I'm here to report that the Reborn company has shown all the criteria to be upgraded in their rankings. Here's the proof. Jimmy slid the proof of sales to Kronk's desk. The pepper-haired man lit up another cigar before he began skimming the papers. His eyes widened as he realized what he was seeing. The Reborn company owns the RD soda. Kronk didn't wait for an answer as he began scanning the page before his eyes ultimately landed at the very bottom. His jaws slacked with his newly lit cigar dropping to the floor. 10,000 sales? Kronk sputtered out. He thought he was imagining a few zeros in the number. But it was real. Kronk immediately ran out of his office and gestured for his secretary to come. Find out how much the pyramidic cuisine got in sales during the day. Jimmy turned around still sitting in his chair and reported the number. 8,231. The secretary looked through her papers before eventually looking back at Jimmy in surprise. Yes, sir. It had 8,231 sales. He's right. Kronk got back in his office and sat back down in his chair completely stunned. An unknown company beat a restaurant from one of the Rising Six. And not just anyone. It was Bo who had both the strength and intellect to eventually lead the pyramidic cuisine to the major factions. So, can we get the ranking officialized now? Jimmy asked. Kronk was still busy digesting the information, but Jimmy didn't have the time to wait. The auction was about to occur in an hour. Right, Kronk said, his hands searching for something in his very cluttered desk. He eventually found the special ink that he needed. Using this magical ink, he wrote down a few words in the paper and signed it with his own blood. There. Congratulations. The Reborn company is now ranked 399th in the Golden 500. Jimmy smiled as he received the paper. He wanted to celebrate, but he knew that he needed to give this paper to Michael. This was the proof he needed to be let inside the auction. And just before Jimmy got out of the door, Kronk called out to him. Wait, is the Reborn company participating in the auction? He asked. Jimmy nodded before rushing out of the Daily Metro and back to Michael. Chapter 518. Kronk's realization. Kronk sat back at his desk, still unable to process what he had just seen. He leaned back on his desk and sighed. And it was at that moment that he saw something from the corner of his eyes. The sales report of the RD soda was sprawled all over his desk disorderly. There must have been about 5 pages filled with nothing but numbers in there. But strangely enough, there was one page at the very end that was different from the rest. He quickly took the paper and began to read it. The Reborn Company in Metropolis. Written by Jimmy. Then he realized it was indeed a newspaper article, but one solely focused on the Reborn Company and their achievements. There's more to the soda? Kronk said to himself. This article detailed the exact moment when Michael, the Reborn Company's leader, stepped into Metropolis and began their expansion. Here he learned about Michael's record-breaking permit test accomplishing something that not even the legacies had accomplished. For element mastery. He's the mystic genius kid. Not only that, but Michael was instrumental in the downfall of Basilisk Ores and their network. He was the one who practically found out about their scheme to try and cheat their way into getting a part of Main Street. Cobra? No way. He was defeated by Michael. Kronk's eyes widened once he realized that Michael beat the infamous Cobra Onionone in a sanctum duel that Cobra solely designed. But it seemed that his surprise didn't end there. Wait, Vanderbilt? He's a Vanderbilt, he shockingly realized. As a major editor of the Daily Metro, he thought he knew everything there was to know about the Vanderbilts in Metropolis. With the kind of talents and gifts that he was showcasing, Michael's name should have been famous all over the Queens region. It was then that he realized something unbelievable. If the boy was being raised and helped by Eyes Vanderbilt, then everyone would have known about him by now. Yet Michael's name wasn't even being spoken by any other Vanderbilt or Eyes. Maybe he did it all by himself? Without the Vanderbilt's help. This realization put him completely stun-locked. He had to put the article away to take a break. After all, even the legacies, Alaric, Aerith, and Bobby couldn't have made it this far this fast without the help of their conglomerate ties. There were always inheritances, connections, and other things that let them have an advantage over other startup companies. Yet Michael did it all by himself. Learning about this lit a spark of curiosity in Kronk's journalistic heart. He knew he was looking at the story of a lifetime. He began to read more, learning about how got the honor of being guided by the Duchess' personal guards towards their castle. Then the article talked about the Vanderbilts getting their justice after learning about Jack's fraud. After that, Jimmy wrote about how Michael got the personal approval of the Duchess to release his products in Metropolis. A novice company got the seal of approval from the Duchess. That's impressive. What kind of products did Michael sell? Oh, was it the RD soda? It would make sense as to why the royal twins and their children visited his stall today. Wait, it's not about the soda? Then what is it? Automobile. As he read the description of this automobile, Kronk audibly gasped out loud, getting the attention of his secretary. Sir Kronk? Are you all right? The secretary looked at their main editor and saw him look completely ashen as if he had just seen a ghost. "Oh my God! Are you having a heart attack?" Kronk looked at her and finally released the breath he'd been holding in. "Che? I very well may have had a heart attack after reading this." As it turned out, Michael was the one who owned and produced the vehicles that got the whole of Metropolis scrambling to get one. From what he heard, the vehicle was the second to last item that was going to be auctioned off this evening, meaning it was part of the main event. The major factions would spend all they had to obtain those. Kronk sat back down in his seat and rubbed his aching head. Hearing about Reborn almost made his heart explode. If they accomplished this in Metropolis, then what the hell have they been doing in the King's region? It was just then that Kronk remembered something. Jimmy begged him back then to read his articles about the Reborn Company and their accomplishments in the King's region. He thought that those were just lies given how far-fetched some of it seemed. He hadn't even finished the whole thing before he immediately tossed it out. After realizing this, Kronk immediately got out of his seat and began rummaging his whole office to find those articles that Jimmy wrote. He overturned the desk, emptied out all the drawers, and he even ripped out the carpet on the floor just to see where they went. The other journalists saw this from the outside and thought that their main editor had finally lost his mind. But thankfully, after a few more hours and some help from his secretary, they were able to find the crumbled-up papers that Jimmy wrote. Kronk mentally prepared himself, lighting up another cigar before diving into the entire history of the Reborn Company. An hour later, his jaws were aching. From the very start of the article, he was speechless. Everything he read felt like fantasy. And if he hadn't just witnessed Reborn work their magic in Metropolis, then he would have dismissed it as nothing but hearsay. But now Kronk believed that everything in the article was true. They were so exaggerated that no one could have thought of it. Immediately, Kronk fixed his desk and brought out his quill and ink. For the first time in 20 years, he was going to be writing an article for the newspaper. Usually he relegated writing to his staff and simply just supervised them. However, this piece of news was so important that he decided to write it himself. He spent an hour furiously writing on the paper, writing down all of his thoughts and opinions about the Reborn Company into one concise text that the citizens of Metropolis would love to read. In the end, he was satisfied with his work. He immediately wanted to publish this and have the word spread out to everyone who had eyes and ears. However, as he looked out the window, he realized that the sun had already gone down. The window for the publication has closed. "Sir Kronk, we have already released the newspaper article about the auction," his secretary reported. Kronk could only curse his luck. If they had time, then this article could have been the front-page news of the day. Its importance was even bigger than the auction and the tourists. This will have to wait until after the auction is over, Kronk decided. Meaning Metropolis would still be unaware of the lion hiding under their shadow. "Get me my formal attire," he said to his secretary. "I'm going to the auction. I have a feeling that things are about to get wild." Chapter 519. Auction Night. Michael sat in his chair, nervously tapping his feet on the floor. The sun had already set, wheels were in motion, and the auction was about to start, with or without him. And just as he thought he'd lost out on this opportunity, the door to his room burst wide open and Jimmy came rushing in, holding in a piece of paper with magical properties. "Ha! HAA! We got it! 399th spot!" Jimmy exclaimed, pushing the certificate on Michael's desk. Michael looked over the paper and smiled. "They just got it just in the nick of time." "Thanks," he said to Jimmy. "I knew I could count on you." "No problem, boss." Jimmy saluted proudly. Now that they secured the ticket to the auction, Michael knew there was only one thing left to do. Prepare. He reached down into his shadow inventory and took out a shiny metal cube. Of course, this was no ordinary cube, for it contained one of the strongest and mysterious metals in the world. Godforge pieces. With a slight twist, the cube twisted and contorted to reveal the flaming raw ores inside. Thanks to the Duchess, he received much more than he was supposed to get after defeating Uncle Jack. She threw in a little extra for his troubles. And because of this, he now had in his possession the biggest chunk of Godforge piece he had ever seen. It was almost the size of a small egg. Its white flames flickered intensely, as if challenging him, daring him to get close and feel its power. "I'm gonna need all the power I can get." This auction was no ordinary auction where money was the sole thing he had to focus on. He didn't know how or why, but Barnaby's auction included duels and fights in the bidding process. If he wanted to get the spirit of old, then he'd need enough power to beat all the major and minor factions in Metropolis. He'd need to beat well-established organizations like the Magic Tower, the Knightly Court, and all the other legacies whose foundations were much deeper than him by manyfold. It was a tough task, and he didn't know if he was going to succeed or not, but he knew that he was going to try his damned hardest to do so. He raised his hand and let his own Godforge pieces communicate with the pieces in the box. Suddenly they started to vibrate and slowly wedge out of their secured positions in the box. They were attracted to him so much so that they became more excited as they got closer and closer to his skin. The metal box, unable to hold on, burst into a million fragments as the Godforge pieces shot directly through its side and towards Michael's heart. The force caused Michael to shoot backwards. The mere quantity of the Godforge pieces that entered into his system almost became far too much for him to bear. He would have slammed his back into the glass door if it weren't for him planting his foot down and skidding his soles into the flooring. Inside his heart, the Godforge pieces turned into liquid as they bypassed the skin, the veins, the muscles, and the bones before eventually reaching the heart. They accelerated to near light speed as they shot towards its rightful place, splattering into the valves of his heart and painting it with the color of Godforge. It only took a few seconds as these new pieces supplied Michael with enough power and energy to make his body slightly glow a white color. His diva, a full right arm and a left fist up to the wrist, manifested above him. Nanoparticles appeared out of the air before swarming over to the diva's uncompleted left arm like bees. And just like before, the nanoparticle swarm morphed and conjoined together to form electrical circuitry that acted as the diva's veins. Then came the bones, which were made out of some kind of black alloy that absorbed absolutely no light at all. The left arm continued to grow, growing from the wrist up to the elbow. But it didn't end there. The Godforge pieces he received were enough to push past the elbow and form more of its mechanical biceps and triceps made out of synthetic fibers until finally it reached the shoulders and reached completion. Michael's diva finally had a complete set of arms. He looked up and felt a little bit more in tune with his abilities. And if he wanted, he could even move the arms just like his own. It followed his every movement, making it seem like his diva was shadow boxing behind him. But of course he knew that this wasn't possible because divas couldn't interact with the real world. They acted just like a projection, meaning if he tried to punch someone with the diva, then it would only pass through the target. It was at that moment that Michael's ears twitched as if he heard something. Huh? He looked around, searching for the source of that sound. He wasn't even sure if he heard something at all. He then looked to the side and saw Shiina right at his door just as she was about to knock on his door. Shiina opened the door and bowed at him. "Lord Michael, our shadow orcs say that the auction is about to start. Plenty of people have already entered the venue, including the major factions." Michael nodded and thanked Shiina for informing him. "I guess I was just too nervous about this auction," he thought to himself. Thankfully, though, he came prepared. Now his diva was finally in the 4th stage of body formation. Judging from his previous encounters with other magnetics, this meant that he could easily defeat someone on the same level as him. And for his opponents who were in the 5th stage, then he had a solid chance of winning against them if he played his cards correctly. But as for opponents in a much higher realm than that, he didn't know the answer. He had never encountered someone 2 levels higher than him. This means I gotta be careful and pick my fights. He looked down at his pockets and felt the box frame of his folded drone. As long as he had this weapon, then he could be sure that he had an advantage that no other magnetic could have. "I'm ready," he said to Shiina. The white-scaled dragonborn smiled and nodded at him. "Very well, Lord Michael. We shall see you at the auction." A magic circle appeared beneath his feet as he used his shadow transportation skill to directly come over to Barnaby's vault. His body slowly descended into his own shadows before completely disappearing into the void. Michael ascended into the ground in a dark alleyway filled with nothing but shadows. He had his formal attire on, wearing a tuxedo with a loosened tie. He didn't want to restrict his own movements too much. He then walked out of the alleyway and found himself staring at Barnaby's vault, shining deep in the night. There were wizards and mages constantly casting light spells in the air to keep everything visible even during the night. Chapter 520 VIP Guest. There was already a large crowd near the entrance filled with civilians, fans, and some newspaper journalists. The whole road was occupied with lavish carriages as one by one the guests entered the venue, showing off their pearly white necklaces, dresses made out of exotic threads, and fur coats. As expected of an auction, this was just basically a way for people to show off their wealth and statuses. Michael stood in line at the entrance while the attendant checked the identity of the guests to see if they belonged inside or not. "Look, that's the owner of Black Time Incorporated with his wife. This is the 5th time they've been invited to the auction." "Wow, that's mildly impressive. But how about the Gentle Tool Company? They've finally been invited to the auction after 8 years of trying." Just then it was Michael's turn to enter the venue. "Whoa, who is that kid? Why does he seem familiar? I think he's lost or something." Usually most companies entered the venue with flair and style. They showed off their extravagant wealth with their Gemetarend carriages and exotic stallions. But Michael was different. He just appeared out of nowhere and lined up like Barnaby's vault was just a normal restaurant. "Good morning, sir." The attendant stopped in his tracks once he saw Michael in front of him. "What's your name, sir? Do you have your parents inside?" Michael shook his head. "I'm here on my own and on behalf of my company. My name is Michael." The man tried his hardest not to look judgmental as he scanned over the list of guests in his paper. And just like he suspected, there was nothing in there about Michael. But just as he was about to politely ask Michael to leave, he suddenly remembered that there was another list that Barnaby gave him. He looked at the different parchment papers in his desk until he saw one completely colored red. This was the guest list for the VIPs. The names inside this list included the likes of Alaric Goldman and of course the Duchess of Metropolis Regina. He didn't even know why he was looking through this list, but his professionalism knew that he had to be thorough or risk offending someone he shouldn't have. And as he got to the bottom of the very short list, he saw it. Michael Vanderbilt. Not only was he on the list, but his name was also circled multiple times by Barnaby himself to emphasize his importance. They were all instructed to treat the boy with absolute respect the same way that they would treat the Duchess of Metropolis. They were even told to inform Barnaby of his appearance, so that he could personally welcome him. The attendant's eyes widened as he realized the mistake he almost made. He quickly stood up ramrod straight and bowed at Michael at a near 90-degree angle. WL. Welcome, Sir Michael Vanderbilt. I apologize for the confusion. Please wait a little bit as Sir Barnaby will welcome you personally. Michael was about to tell him that there was no need since it was excessive, but the door suddenly burst wide open and Barnaby rushed outside with a big warm smile. Michael, I'm glad you made it. Barnaby greeted Michael, cupping his hands together. I forgot how fast this guy is, Michael remembered. Hey Barnaby, I got the ranking that I need. Here's the permit, he said, about to take out the paper from his inventory. There's no need for that now, Barnaby quickly said. I had my people stationed in the Daily Metro for the news of your company's new rankings. After all, without you this auction would only be half as spectacular as I want it to be. Meanwhile, the rest of the people waiting outside couldn't help but look in shock and awe as they saw Barnaby greet Michael like he was some VIP. He didn't even do that when Alaric or the other legacies came in. He knows Barnaby personally. Who is this kid? Does anybody know him? The boy is getting the VIP treatment. Someone must know who he is. If Kronk could see this, then he would vomit out in pain. As a journalist, he wanted the people to be informed of the latest news as soon as possible. But because he found out about Michael and the Reborn company too late, the rest of Metropolis would also have to wait a little while longer before they realized who Michael truly was. Anyway, Michael, congratulations on an extraordinary feat. I heard from someone that you defeated Beau's restaurant in terms of sales for the day. That's impressive. Michael took the compliment with a smile. Thanks. By the way, can my company also participate in this auction? Barnaby nodded. Of course. I've already prepared a personal suite for you and your crew in the auction room. You'll get one of the best views available. This was the reason why he went to the auction earlier than the others. He didn't know if they were also allowed inside, but thankfully Barnaby was gracious enough to give them a big enough room for everyone. He silently sent a message to the others using his shadow skill to come to the auction soon. Come inside. Let's talk about the auction. Barnaby led Michael inside, where they went into the restricted area of the venue away from other people. This was one of the perks of being a VIP. Are the automobiles ready for auction? Barnaby asked excitedly. Michael nodded. Of course. We've prepared 20 cars and 10 trucks ready to be deployed. Just say the word and I'll have my guys drive the automobiles here in just a few minutes. Barnaby pumped his fists. That's great. But don't deploy them all at once. We'll only need one of each for the auction showcase. Michael silently contacted Shiina to do as Barnaby asked. Shay. That's a load off my shoulders. You won't believe the kind of day I'd had, Barnaby said, sighing. Having to forward the auction a few weeks in advance almost caused me to lose all my weight. Look, I'm skinny now. Michael saw no difference though, but he kept his silence to not seem offensive. I heard that it's because of the tourists that you had to hurry the auction, Michael said, subtly probing for information. Yes, you're right. You'll probably see them soon in the auction. Those mermen were way ahead of schedule. We thought they wouldn't come until after the auction. So there's not going to be any parade anymore? Barnaby shook his head. No, it'll still happen. It's only these mermen that got here early. And because of their stature, the Duchess and I had to accommodate their wishes for a premature visit. Mermen? Michael thought to himself, intrigued. If they caused all the commotion in Metropolis, then this means they're probably a high-ranking citizen. He was excited to see a merman personally. He didn't even know how they could breathe on land, but he guessed that there must be some kind of magic they used to keep themselves wet. They aren't going to be wearing some fishbowl helmets, are they? Chapter 521. Auction Rules. Barnaby happily led Michael to his own personal suite in the auction. He looked at the spacious room and saw a bunch of sofa chairs pointed right at the glass wall on the opposite side of the door. Look, said Barnaby as he looked down at the glass wall. You can see everything here. It's impressive, is it not? Michael looked down and was surprised to see that there was a large open room right on the other side of the glass wall. His room was located at the top, just like the suites and private rooms that you would see in a concert or a stadium. Although the auction venue wasn't as big as football fields, it was large enough for Michael to realize that this venue didn't look like it could fit inside the Barnaby's vault building. It looked far too spacious, meaning that the structure itself would have to be twice as big as it was currently seen outside. Michael used his supreme skill to see the mana disturbance in the air. He realized that the structure of the mana looked extremely similar to the pocket dimensions that he'd been on before. Wait. Is this? Barnaby smiled. Oh, have you noticed it? My whole building is connected to a whole lot of pocket dimensions. This is just the first one. After all, I pride myself in being a fine collector of pocket dimensions from all over the royal continent. If there's anything up for sale, no matter how big or small it is, I always make sure to buy it from anyone no matter the price. If I wasn't going to be an auctioneer, then my company would dabble in the discovery and trading of pocket dimensions. Michael didn't even know that pocket dimensions could be sold or constructed like this. He always thought that they were just pockets of spaces that were fixed to a spot and couldn't be moved. But as it turned out, there was a bustling trade of pocket dimensions happening all over the continent, and Barnaby just so happened to be the biggest buyer of them all. It must have cost a fortune. How did you even put them here like this? Barnaby laughed and wagged his finger. Oh ho ho, you won't get the secret formula from me so easily, Michael. Unless you want to exchange secrets, of course. Michael definitely considered the offer. Anyways, as you can see, there's a lot of other VIP rooms around you, Barnaby said, as he pointed to the tinted windows that were located in a circle above the venue. This is usually just reserved for the major factions, but I had to pull some strings. Haha, it's my auction after all. Below your room are the minor factions. The more successful they are, the more the further up they are located. If I may recall, the company below yours is the Pyramidic Cuisine. Michael looked down and saw multiple other floors with tinted glasses. There must have been about 10 rooms in a circle going down 5 floors, totaling 50 minor faction companies in total. And below them is the ground floor. This is for normal people who have the honor to witness the auction without having to participate in it. That's why they're located right next to the stage, right where all the action will occur. There was a white rectangular stage in the middle of the venue, surrounded by what must have been hundreds of seats in total, all occupied by men and women wearing fancy suits and dresses fit only for the high class. Isn't the stage a little too big? That's just where the items are going to be displayed, right? Michael asked. It was strange because it looked about as large as a basketball court. Oh ho ho, that's not all. Like I told you, that's where all the action will occur. To explain it simply, money isn't the only thing you'll be bidding in the auction. It's also some action. What do you mean? Barnaby then pointed at the stage. You see, in a normal auction, one would have to bid an amount of money that is bigger than anyone could afford, right? Now ask yourself this question. Why? Michael thought of the only answer he could think of. Because many people want the item for themselves, so they spend a lot of money on it. Barnaby shook his head. That is wrong. The reason why people do that is because the seller wants their item to be appraised at the highest level possible. If they just wanted to sell it, they could have sold it in any other store. Why an auction? The seller wants the best money for their item, and that's enough for them. But for me, that's just half of what's necessary. Normal auctions miss something completely: power. In my auction, one would have to not only prove themselves that they have the money to properly value the item, but they have the strength and power to keep it to themselves. Michael was surprised at the boldness of Barnaby's thinking. Upon first glance, it sounded excessive. Why fight if money could solve the problem? But then he remembered that, in this world, strength mattered just as much as money. If you had enough strength, you could duel someone and obtain what you need without buying it. This auction had the same principle as that. So then how does the auction work? Do you bid money, or do you fight someone to prove you're worthy of it? Barnaby smiled. Both. During the auction, I will pose 2 questions. How much do you want to pay, and who do you want to play? Your bid into the auction has to come in 2 answers. 1 is your bid, and 2 is the name or names of the people who will fight for possession of the item. Michael knew what Barnaby was saying, but he couldn't understand it fully. Bidding the money was easy, but the second part was hard to comprehend without seeing it for himself. Just follow the lead of others, Barnaby suggested, seeing him slightly confused. And don't worry. I'll tell everyone what they need to bid in order to participate in the auction. If you want to participate in the bidding and you think that you can accept the conditions of the bid, then you can tap on the glass and I'll know that you're in. Michael nodded. That sounded easy enough. He was only planning on bidding for the Spirit of the Old, which would only appear at the very end of the auction, so he had the whole duration of the auction to figure out its rules. Anyways, I have to go. Everyone awaits for the auction. Good luck, Michael. I'll be rooting for ya, Barnaby said before rushing out the door with the speed of an Olympic runner. Michael was left all alone in his VIP suite, looking over all the other tinted rooms beside him. From what he recalled, there were only 6 companies or organizations in the major factions. The 3 legacies, the Magic Tower, the Knightly Court, and the Royal Family. And including him, there were 7 VIP suits in total. But as he counted them, he realized that there were actually 7 of them all in all. Chapter 522, Mermen. That must be where the mermen were located, Michael guessed. Are they participating in the auction or just watching? He was kind of excited to see them in person. People had to fight for the items, meaning that if the mermen wanted to participate in the bidding, then they would have to show off their powers as well. He didn't know if mermen worked the same as humans or demi-humans, so he was curious at what kind of power they had in their bodies. Should I? Michael contemplated using his supreme skill to peer through the glass and see the light mana signature in their bodies. It would be easy for him to know which room they were located in if he could see their bodies. Unable to restrain his curiosity, he activated his supreme skill and changed the way he saw the world. He could see mana clearly. It was as if he was transported in their world and acted as if he was a mana himself. He looked through the rooms, seeing many different kinds of people waiting on the sofas and looking over the tinted glasses. Finally, in the opposite room from his, he saw a completely different body unlike anything he'd ever seen before. Their bodies were mostly made out of water mana. That was how they breathed in land. They automatically converted the water mana in the air and breathed through it. And although the details weren't clear, he could see that their faces closely resembled that of humans. The only difference was their fish scales showing on the edges of their faces. Not only that, but they seemed to have webbed feet and hands resembling that of a frog's. But aside from that, they looked like ordinary humans. He should have known. Of course, they weren't going to be like the cartoons he saw from his previous world where mermen had heads of fishes and used fish bowls full of water to survive. That's enough snooping around for now. I don't want to get noticed by those guys from the magic tower. Anyways, he satisfied his curiosity. Just then the door to his room opened and he saw the Rebornian crew arrive with amazed looks on their faces. "Lord Michael, we have arrived," bowed Shiina. "Look guys, there's so many people down there," Zion said as he peeked out from the glass window. Vivi, Grieve, and Fudge followed suit. The four stooges smushed their faces into the tinted glass to see the auction venue clearly. "Ho ho ho, I haven't seen anything like this in forever. At least I think so. I don't know. I don't have any eyes, ho ho ho." Yummy emotions, Vivi salivated. They almost have the same anticipation as when people are waiting in line for the roller coaster. "Guys, someone might see you there," Michael warned them. "Don't want to spook them. I don't know how they'll react if they see an undead 9-star realm skeleton general, a pixie queen, a dragonborn, and a slime all in the same room." Meanwhile, Jaku already occupied one of the couches for himself and took a nap. Umisu quietly sat beside him, silent and looking forward to Michael's commands. "Whoa. Is this the VIP room?" Max asked out loud. "Of course. My son deserves nothing less," Lilia bragged. Michael also invited some of the Vanderbilts for the auction. "Why? The more the merrier," as he liked to say. "Look at all these very important people," Fudge muttered. "This would have been the perfect time to spread my clones and spy on everyone." "Oh, if you find one that's strong, tell me so I can compare myself to them," Zion said. Michael was about to tell them to settle down when he heard the sound of a large gong echo throughout the walls. Bong! He looked down and saw Barnaby at the center stage wearing a full white suit that made him look larger than life. A magic circle appeared beneath his feet, which Michael deciphered to be some kind of voice amplification spell. "Welcome everyone to the annual Barnaby's Vault auction." His loud announcement sent waves of applause from the people seated at the ground floor. They cheered like they were a crowd about to watch a world title boxing match. This almost sent Vivi into a frenzy as the emotion from the room reached its peak. "First of all, I would like to apologize to everyone about the sudden change in schedule. Some of you may deem this as unfortunate, but it is for a good reason. As some of you may not know, we are given the privilege of being visited by one of our dearly beloved neighbors from the other side of the world. The mermen from Atlantis." The crowd gasped and awed before looking up at the VIP suits. Of course, the major factions already knew about this, so they weren't that surprised. However, about 80% of the minor factions were completely caught unaware by the news. Barnaby kept silent, letting the crowd process and digest the information he just gave them. He knew that there would be lots of discussions taking place within the tinted glasses, especially for those companies who were wholly unprepared from the mermen's appearance in the auction. Ahem. "Ladies and gentlemen, the mermen would like you all to know that they are sorry for the inconvenience they had caused. Because of this, they are willing to give something to the auction that I think all of you would like." This time Michael felt some disturbance from the VIP suites. It looked like even they didn't know that there'd be a gift from the mermen. "I know that there have been rumors swirling around that the final item of the night will be none other than the spirit of old." Everyone turned silent, waiting for Barnaby's next words. "And I would like to confirm that yes, we are indeed auctioning off 5 drops of Su during the final part of the auction." Michael knew that this was the goal for all companies, especially so for the major factions. But Barnaby let the silence linger. He was a master at capturing the crowd's attention. "The mermen would like to announce that they are willing to give 15 drops of the spirit of old as compensation for the inconvenience that they caused. This will bring the total Su drops to be auctioned off to 20 whole drops." The whole auction venue went into an uproar. Excited shouts, gasps, and even some howling echoed out as every single company got excited from the news. Even the major factions were caught off guard. Alaric Aerith and the other leaders frantically set up an emergency meeting with their team members to try and formulate a plan on the spot. The only ones who didn't look surprised were the Duchess and the royal family. She remained still in her seat with a half-empty glass bottle of RD soda right next to her. 20 drops. Michael muttered to himself. He could only imagine what kind of upgrades he could purchase with that many drops. He could practically turn his drone into a futuristic doomsday warfare device through the upgrades alone. Chapter 523, Sue Drops, Bonus Chap. Michael calmed himself down. He was sure that he was not the only person who wanted those 20 drops. He could already see the major factions planning to give it their all to try and obtain all 20 of those drops for themselves. Now, if it was just a matter of money, then he was sure that he could contend with them in some way. He had a lot of funds back in the nation of Reborn with hundreds of millions of gold coins located in their treasury ready to be spent. However, this auction was different. If he wanted to get those Sue drops, then he needed to contend with the major factions with his strength as well. Now he might be talented and strong for his own realm, but he wasn't delusional enough to believe that he could defeat the major factions all by himself. They definitely had fighters whose cultivation levels were very far above him. Just Alaric Aerith and Bobby alone. He knew that those three were close if not right at the top of the body formation realm. And it wasn't just them. The Magic Tower and the Knightly Court were from very large organizations whose strengths were incredibly deep. They were probably even stronger than the legacies. Now I know what some of you are thinking. Barnaby, why do we care about Sue when we know that the major factions are the ones who will end up winning them anyway? And my answer to that is do not worry. I will be taking away 5 drops and allowing the minor factions to contend with them without the major factions interfering. Barnaby's controversial decision led a lot of companies from the minor faction to become excited. Meanwhile, the major factions had an understandably less than positive reception to this because they felt that they deserved all 20 of those drops. Now before you go on and complain, I shall tell you that it's not me who suggested this. It's the mermen themselves. This was one of their conditions in selling off 15 drops of Sue. After hearing this, Michael's perception of the mermen changed. They're not here to participate. They're here to be entertained, he realized. Letting the minor factions fight for the Sue would add a lot more excitement during the auction. This would allow the minor factions to show off their strength without worrying about the major factions stomping them through force. It would be boring if the one who kept winning were the major factions. But this is good. This is my chance, Michael thought. Those 5 drops are all I need to make a substantial upgrade to my drone. He was a lot more confident in winning against the minor factions. Their strengths were similar to him, and if they were stronger, then it was only by a little margin. As long as he played smart, then he could find the winning play in the end. Of course, Michael wasn't the only one thinking that. At the layer right below the VIP suites were the rooms for the top 10 minor factions in Metropolis. Of course, this included the Rising Six. That included the Pyramidic Cuisine. Beauregard sat in her seat, her bountiful blonde hair curling up over her shoulders. She blankly stared at the glass wall, seemingly looking over Barnaby and the auction venue itself. But in truth, she wasn't concentrating on the auction at all. Even though Barnaby was announcing something completely exciting that would definitely benefit her and her company, she couldn't help but think of something completely outside of the auction. After all, just before the auction started, she received a message that her newly created recipe, the terracotta meat and mud juice, didn't receive the top sales of the day. They got second. She thought that she would be able to use the successful debut of her new recipe to bolster her rankings in the Golden 500, therefore keeping her spot as the best star of the Rising Six. However, her plans were spoiled because of an unknown refreshment company taking over the entertainment district completely. She had never accounted for this. Never in a million years would she have ever anticipated this situation. Someone was able to beat her. It wasn't Rena from Spice Vice. And it wasn't any of the other Rising Six either. It was from an unknown company who mysteriously got the royals' attention for themselves. She hadn't even gotten the privilege of cooking for any of the royals yet. As she thought about it more and more, a smile crept up on her face. Despite losing to this unknown company, she wasn't mad. She was intrigued. She was curious to see the mastermind of the whole situation for herself. She had no doubt that someone like that could rival that of the Rising Six. Yet they remained in the shadows all this time. She crossed her legs and looked at the auction venue. They're here, she guessed. Where are you? She scanned all of the rooms surrounding her, trying to peer through the tinted glasses, hoping to see a glimpse of this mysterious company. To be honest, she was more interested in meeting this guy rather than getting the Sue. Miss Bo, are you listening? One of her attendants called out to her. It was at that moment that she realized that her team was still brainstorming ways to try and win the auction. They had to be strategic in how they used their resources properly. They had to know when to bid or when to let go. It doesn't matter, Bo said to them. As long as we get that Sue, we'll have an advantage over every other Rising Six. They won't be able to catch up to us. Right next to her booth was none other than Spice Vice's private suite. Vishnu sat in his chair while Rena paced back and forth through the room. Calm down, daughter. Rena looked back at her father, her eyes seemingly lit afire. This is our chance, Pa. If we get those Sue, we can overtake the other Rising Six and become one step closer to Bo. Of course Vishna knew this all too well. However, he wasn't as excited or as worried as his daughter. That's only if you can defeat the other companies vying for the sue. I know how to deal with the Rising Six, father. I've studied them. This is what I've been preparing for, she said with determination. They're not the ones you have to worry about, Vishna said, chuckling. Reena stared at her father in disbelief. The boy again? Father, I don't even think they're in this auction at all. They didn't have time to get the ranking. Vishna shook his head. They got it. Today. What? Of course, knowing how much her father loved to talk about Michael and his company, Reena did a little bit of research all on her own. And she found out from public records that they were ranked 450 in the Golden 500. She knew just how impossible it was to move up 50 ranks in the span of a single day. And he's saying that they made it. Chapter 524. Auction start. Bonus chap. Without further ado, let's start the auction. Barnaby screamed, his voice echoing through the whole venue. The excitement in the crowd grew hotter with the anticipation. The companies, on the other hand, were just waiting for Barnaby to reveal the first item to decide if they were going to be purchasing it or not. For our very first item, I have something very special up in store. Barnaby stepped away from the center stage to make way. And suddenly a platform suddenly levitated out of the ground, revealing a rectangular box the size of a human person to appear. The item itself was covered in a red linen that slightly obscured its true nature. Still, one could clearly make a guess at what the item was because of the familiar shape and edges of the object. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you, Barnaby pulled down the red carpet. A full set of dwarven armor, sword and shield. Everyone feasted their eyes upon a magnificent piece of metal work. Even from far away, the clarity and the unblemished metal made the whole armor look like it was ripped straight out from heaven. It's not just one. It's not just two. It's not just three. But 10 whole sets for you and for your crew. Companies, please place your bids starting at 100,000 gold coins. As soon as Barnaby said those magic words, companies started knocking on their tinted window glasses to place their bids. Judging from the sounds of knocks, it looked like every single company from the minor factions placed their bids immediately. After all, 1 set of dwarven armor was good. 2 sets were great. But 10? That was a game changer. Being able to arm their major officers with supremely crafted metal armor would not only help them in the long run but also in the short term, mainly the auction itself. Barnaby, even with all the chaos from the knockings, knew who was the first one to place his bid. 110000 from the Talon speak. Just then another knock. 120,000. The knocking continued, leaving Barnaby not even a chance to voice out the bids. Knock! Barnaby excitedly pointed at one of the top rooms in the auction venue. We got a 1 million bid from Spice. It was at this point that the other minor factions decided to bow out and refuse to bid any higher. The cacophony of knocks that plagued the auction now turned silent. The dwarven metal set was good, but it wasn't that good. They had better ways to spend their money. A 1 million bid. Is there anyone that can top that? And as if accepting Barnaby's challenge, a knock immediately resounded out just right next to the Spice booth. We got 1.2 million from Crocodile Leather. Barnaby exclaimed. But it wasn't long after another knock resounded through the venue. Oh, a huge jump. 1.5 million is now the top bid, coming straight from Alligator Company. The crowd on the ground floor looked up in awe at 3 companies vying for the bid. They expected this. After all, they were all in the Rising Six. Whoa, the Rising Six are going to be spending that much on dwarven armor sets. It's not just the armor. It's the knowledge ingrained into those armors. I see. So they're actually vying to bid for a chance to learn how to make armors as good as the dwarves. Another knock echoed in the venue. Another contender. 1.6 million is now the bid, thanks to Angelic Crafts. It wasn't long after that did another bid come from another one from the Rising Six. 1.7 million. Courtesy of the Mountain Movers. Exclaimed Barnaby. Spice came up with another offer. 1.8 million. 1.9. 2 million. The Rising Six went back and forth on their bids, refusing to get outbid by the other. Meanwhile, as the very heated auction was going off, Michael and the other Rebornians looked down at the glass and couldn't help but be disappointed at what they saw. That's it? Zion scoffed. They're paying this much for rune-off-the-mill armor sets. I don't even think it's in the dwarven quality, Jaku commented, peeking with one eye open and the other asleep. The Dwarven King would be very pleased to know that the armor that leaked out of their kingdom is only of low quality, Shiina said, smiling. The other Vanderbilts were speechless when they heard what the Dragonborns were saying. The dwarven armor wasn't good. If Max or the other Vanderbilts got a hand on one of those armor sets, then they would treat it like a treasure and pass it down to the next generation like it was a priceless heirloom. Yet, for these Rebornians, they didn't even consider it as passable. If they thought that way, then what kind of armors were they used to back in their territory? Of course, Michael and the other Rebornians were so used to extremely high-quality dwarven materials from the best of the best that their criteria of good was completely skewed. The armor set was perfectly fine and had no imperfections. But for them it was one of the worst quality dwarven smithing they had ever seen. Michael, are you sure you don't want to bid? Max asked. Michael looked back at him. Why? You want one? Max immediately waved his hand and refused. No, that's way too pricey for me. But wouldn't you like something for you or your friends here? Fufu Lilia chuckled. Brother-in-law, that kind of metal isn't worthy of my son. Michael then noticed that little William was looking over the dwarven armor with stars in his eyes. The boy clearly wanted one for himself. He approached him and squatted down. Do you want one? The boy looked meekly at Michael before nodding his head. Michael smiled and looked at Shiina. She knew exactly what to do even without him saying it. She contacted the shadow orc inhabiting her feet and gave him some directions. It wasn't long after that did the orc show itself to the group with a new and shiny armor set in his hands. Here, try it on for size, Michael said as Shiina handed the armor over to William. As his son excitedly put on the new armor, Max couldn't help but gasp out loud once. He realized the extremely beautiful quality of metal that it was made out from. Michael. What is that? He shrugged. Oh, don't worry. This is just some ordinary armor we had in store back in the parched lands. Max gulped. Once he got a closer look at the armor, it bore a close resemblance to the one being auctioned off below. But compared to this, that one looked like a cheap imitation copy that a 5-year-old made by himself. That wouldn't happen to be dwarven make, right? I mean, dwarves did make it, so yeah. But don't worry, it's not that valuable. We have a lot of dwarven apprentices looking to practice their skills. This is just one of them. Max almost collapsed down into the couch. Even the other Vanderbilts had their jaws completely fallen to the floor. Chapter 525. Bidding commences. You know the dwarves? Max asked, astounded. Yeah. Me and the Dwarven King have a business agreement with each other. They give us Damascus steel, we give them beer. You should come visit the nation of Reborn soon so that you can see them for yourselves. Max and the Vanderbilt family were flabbergasted to find out that Michael had connections with the infamously antisocial dwarves. While everyone was fighting for the great quality Damascus steel armor in the auction, Michael had so many of them that his lowest quality armor was something that even the major factions would covet. It was a culture shock to see how much the Rebornians treated this treasure worth more than 2 million gold coins as something worthless. 2.5 million bid. Barnaby shouted excitedly to the crowd. The pyramidic cuisine has finally entered the bidding, ladies and gentlemen. Finally, after this enormous bid, the knocks stopped completely. No one was willing to increase the price even more than that. 2.5 million? That's pretty good, Michael thought to himself. He was kind of regretting not putting a few of their dwarven items up for auction, seeing as how valuable they seemed to everyone in Metropolis. Going once? Going twice? Declared. 2.5 million is now the accepted price for the auction bid. The crowd clapped and cheered, turning their heads up to look at their private suite. So do they get the armor now? What about that dual aspect that Barnaby was talking about? He noticed that despite the auction bid reaching a peak, there weren't any celebrations from the pyramidic cuisine at all. In fact, even the other companies were behaving even more seriously, leaning forward with focus as if the real fight had just begun. Now comes the amazing part. Will anybody else bid 2.5 million gold coins to fight against the pyramidic cuisine? Barnaby asked, looking around the venue. It was at that moment that a knock came from the tinted glass right next to the pyramidic cuisine's room. Crocodile Leather has joined the fray, everyone. They are more than willing to pay out 2.5 million gold coins. What's happening? Another company is also offering a 2.5 million bid? Michael asked himself. He thought that the bidding was over since no one could top the pyramidic cuisine's high offer. It wasn't long after before another knock came. Looks like Mountain Movers have decided to battle it out as well. Is it going to be a three-way fight, or will more companies have the guts to fight it out against the Rising Six? Barnaby's words were directly challenging all the other companies to make a bid. The more of them that joined, the more exciting it was to watch. Knock, knock, knock. In an electrifying turn of events, the other Rising Six companies also decided to put their names forward with a 2.5 million bid. Going once, going twice. Declared. Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, I didn't think that we'd get to see a fight between the Rising Six so early in the night. Barnaby beamed. And now comes the second part of the auction. Barnaby stepped away from the podium and walked down into the stands. Once he was completely away from the white platform, he signaled with a bell for his workers to activate the spell, creating a large magic circle that completely encompassed the stage. Mana poured onto the magic circle from 5 wizards around the auction arena. The stage suddenly split in half, revealing a bright white light that seeped out of the cracks. The platform continued to crawl out of the arena, showing a very deep hole in the center of the auction. The crowd gasped with awe and wonder as they peeked out of the bright blue hole. What they saw made them clap for the wondrous stage that Barnaby had prepared for the 7 bidders. Michael's eyes widened as he realized what was happening. That's not a hole. That's a window to a pocket dimension. As he and the other people peered into the tinted glass and out into the hole, they saw an amazing sight. And through the hole in the center they could peek at this new Earth as if it was just a giant aquarium. From his vantage point, Michael could see a thick gathering of pine trees in the middle of the land, coloring a huge part of the terrain with a natural green color. Beside that was a mountain that reached high up into the skies and almost reached the very edges of the hole itself. And using his supreme skill, he could see that there were actually animal life forms below living a normal life. This didn't look like a pocket dimension. This was an entirely new planet with its own ecosystem. This will be your stage bidders for one of our games in this auction. The rules are simple. Find the golden coin and bring it up at the very top of the mountain. Whoever accomplishes this task first will have the privilege of buying the dwarven armor sets. The crowd erupted in excited murmurings. Michael looked at the companies down below and saw them having a discussion amongst each other. It was easy to guess that they were planning for the game after hearing about its rules. Now it's time for you to bid your fighters. Pyramidic cuisine. You are the first to offer, Barnaby said, patiently waiting for their next words. It wasn't long before a knock resounded out from the tinted glass. Right after that, a man wearing a dashing black suit came towards Barnaby with an unopened scroll in his hands. Barnaby accepted the paper before untying the strings to roll it out. The Pyramidic cuisine is willing to deploy only 6 of their officers for the bid. Is there anyone who wants to counter their offer? Barnaby asked, showing the 5 other companies the scroll that he received from the Pyramidic cuisine. Knock. This time the knock came from the Alligator Company. And just like before, another man came out and presented Barnaby with a scroll. A new offer has taken place. The Alligator Company is willing to deploy only 4 of their officers. After that, a few seconds passed and no companies made a counteroffer. Barnaby started counting down. Going once, going twice, going thrice. Declared. These 6 companies are willing to deploy 4 of their finest officers to fight in our game. Whoever wins, it will be given the privilege to buy the dwarven armor sets for 2.5 million coins. The crowd erupted in cheers and heated discussions as they began to talk about who they thought would win the bidding. It's gotta be the Pyramidic cuisine. They may be a food company, but Bo surrounds herself with lots of strong fighters. I think it's gonna be the Alligator Company. I remember one of their officers being a good treasure hunter. After watching everything unfold, Michael finally realized the rules of the auction. The bidding of gold coins wasn't simply for monetary value. It also acted as an entrance fee to the game to acquire the item. Chapter 526. First game. The very limit that the Pyramidic cuisine could offer for the dwarven armor set was 2.5 million gold coins. However, they weren't the only ones who could afford to pay that kind of money. 5 other companies decided they could pay that too. That was where the game came in. They were going to battle it out to see which one of them would ultimately buy the armor. Are the auctions always like this? Michael asked Max. He was the only one who was knowledgeable about this given his long tenure in Metropolis. Yes, that is how Barnaby's auction works. Even though I've only been in the auction a couple of times because the Vanderbilt business failed, I still hear rumors about it from time to time. Michael was very intrigued with this kind of format. One would have to prove that they had the money and the power to obtain the item. So if a lot of companies agree to a bid, then will all of them participate in it? Technically, yes. However, that's where the bidding comes in. Many of these companies intentionally make the price of the item a lot higher than it's normally supposed to go for, just so they could make their competition a lot smaller. As you can see, only the Rising 6 could afford to spend 2.5 million gold coins on a few pairs of dwarven armor. This high price weeds out the other companies who are not that desperate to get the item. Michael rubbed his chin. I see. That makes sense. Only the truly successful companies can shell out this much money on the first auction item. That's right, Max nodded as he looked over the tinted glass. There are a lot of people who want that dwarven armor, but they know that they have to conserve not only money but power for the items that are going to be in there later. After all, there's a good chance that their people could get injured while competing in the game. It's not worth it to deploy them in this game, especially since the one they're going up against is the Rising 6. The auction was quite complex and gave a lot of room for people to strategize and plan ahead. After all, they weren't dealing with just money but also personnel. That's why they're also bidding for how many officers they get to deploy, Michael realized. Most companies want as many soldiers in the game as possible. That would give them a better chance of winning. Of course, other companies don't want that, especially if they know that the company that they're up against was someone who had numerous officers who were strong. That's why the Alligator Company denied the Pyramidic cuisine's offer to have only 6 officers participate in the game. Their bidding could even go as low as only 1 person. Of course, not a lot of companies want to do that because it would lower their chances of winning, so they all agree to have more officers for a better chance. Michael was starting to understand the rules of the auction now. Players, please come down and enter the pocket dimension when I say so. It wasn't long before people arrived, coming from the back doors and into the center stage. There were 24 of them in total, grouped up by 4. Each of them wore a uniform that distinctly showed allegiance to the company. Michael, if you're going to participate in one of the auctions, then I suggest that you also start using uniforms for your crew, Max advised. Some of the pocket dimensions that Barnaby owns will transport you and your teammates in completely different locations. He looked back at Max, realizing something. There's other pocket dimensions? Does that mean that there's other games? Yes. Each item up for bid will have a different game associated with it. It ranges from a simple fighting arena to a maze labyrinth where it is more than possible that no competitors meet with each other. Michael finally understood just how rich Barnaby was in terms of pocket dimensions. If he could have a different one for each item up for auction, then he must own hundreds if not thousands of pocket dimensions. Look, they're starting to move, Max said, pointing below. Michael noticed that he didn't recognize anyone. Even though Spice Vice was included in the game, arena was nowhere to be seen. Are there any restrictions for company owners to participate? Not really. If you're looking for the Rising Six themselves, they probably won't show up, only if they really need it. They need to reserve their strength. Michael understood their reasoning. However, he would have liked to see them fight so that he could gauge his own strength against them. But that was probably the reason why they weren't going to show up, especially for the first item. At my mark, get set, go! Upon Barnaby's signal, the participants jumped into the hole and disappeared into the pocket dimension. It was at this moment that the crowd began to take out fancy binoculars from their pockets. This was what allowed them to see what was happening down below. Michael used his supreme skill to observe everything with clarity. He saw that each team were all separated from one another, appearing in completely random spots inside the terrain. They all frantically tried to search for the gold coin in the ground, unearthing stones, wrecking bushes, and even felling trees in an attempt to get a better light from the skies. Our game has gone off to a great start. Who will be the first one to see the gold coin, I wonder? Barnaby commented on everything he saw unfold. Look at the second quadrant. The Alligator Company and Crocodile Leather have spotted each other. Will they ignore their rivalry to search for the coin, or will they try to take each other down? As more and more people scoured the lands for the gold coin, fights inevitably broke out. Barnaby did a good job figuring out which fight was interesting and pointing it out to the crowd. He gave them background information like their name, their affiliation, as well as the power difference between them. Oh my gosh, 2 fighters from Mountain Movers have been knocked unconscious. Oh wait. Look. Someone found the coin. A lucky fellow from the Pyramidic Cuisine held in his hands a shining gold coin with Barnaby's face stamped on it. Immediately they rushed towards the mountain. However, the other players seemed to have noticed this and tried to stop him in his tracks. The lucky guy had to fight his way to the foot of the mountain with several people trying to get the gold coin out of his hands. Thankfully for him, he had his own backup who successfully warded off any stealing attempts from the other players. It wasn't long before the guy used his skills to jump through boulders and icy terrain, eventually reaching the peak of the mountain and winning the first item for his company. Congratulations to the Pyramidic Cuisine! Barnaby shouted, with the crowd howling and praising the winner for an exciting show. Even Max couldn't help but clap for the Pyramidic Cuisine. Bo's officers were incredibly strong and extremely skilled. It was a powerful show of force, telling everyone that it wasn't just Bo who was talented but also her crew. Michael, do you see how good they are? That's what you should keep in mind later. Bo's surrounded by very powerful. But as he looked at Michael and the Rebornians, he saw that none of them were even paying attention. Chapter 527. Max is done with Rebornians. That's why Bo's at the top. Even her officers are the cream of the crop. She can even arm all of her officers with mithril relics. No one could have won against that team. As soon as they got their hands on the golden coin, I knew no one would be able to steal it. But props to the rest of the Rising Six. Their officers were no joke. It's just everyone's unfortunate luck that the coin ended up in the chef's hands. Anyone and everyone was praising the Rising Six for their stellar performance in the golden coin game. The battles were intense and nail-biting. Boulders were destroyed, forests turned bald, and even the skies were assaulted by powerful magic from the fighters. Many of the minor faction companies who witnessed this heaved a sigh of relief. If that's who we would have fought against, then I'm lucky I didn't continue bidding. I knew they were strong, but I didn't know they were that powerful. Those chefs especially are extremely skilled with their cleavers. This would have demoralized me, but it's actually good. At least now they're a little bit tired. We'll have a chance on the other items because of this. Even though none of the leaders from the Rising Six fought in this game, the strength and power that the fighters showed was completely above what some of these companies could even do. Practically everyone was amazed by the fighters. The only ones who weren't impressed were the Rebornians. They even looked a little bored. Why aren't you guys reacting? He asked them. If you're going to compete in the auction, you'll eventually have to compete with them in the future. This is a chance for you to study their movements and get an advantage over them. Max was just giving them an earnest advice because he wanted Michael to win in the auction. The leaders of the Rising Six were almost impossible to defeat, but their officers could be taken down with the right amount of planning. He thought that this was the only way they could beat them in a fair match. What's there to look at? Jaku asked, still laying on the couch, eyes closed. YAWN. I would rather sleep. Huh. Sleep? Yeah. Zion butted in. I'll just punch my way into victory. No need to worry about plans or stuff like that. Max couldn't believe what he was hearing. They were talking about the Rising Six crew as if they were just run-off-the-mill fighters that could be found off the streets. But the truth was the exact opposite. Those people were handpicked to be the best of the best. Some of them even had the ability to create their own large company if they wanted to. Sir Max, as much as I hate to agree with my brothers, they're right. There is no need to plan ahead. Strong or weak, we'll beat them if we need to, Shiina said confidently. Their sheer confidence left Max speechless. He then looked at Michael, who nodded while laughing. Don't worry, uncle. They know what they're doing. It was at this point that Max started to wonder. Who were these people? He had never seen their species of demi-humans before. They looked like a mix of salamander and Komodo dragons, which gave him no indication of their inherent strength. It also didn't help that most demi-humans were inherently bad at magic. Because of this, he thought that they were weapon fighters. However, they didn't even have their weapons on hand. Meanwhile, down below in the auction venue, the stage slowly crawled from underneath the stands and slowly came together to form the platform covering up the hole for the pocket dimension. Ha ha ha. Looks like I'll have to pay a lot of money to clean up that mess they've left behind, Barnaby joked. But jests aside, congratulations to the winner. The transaction and retrieval of the item will take place after the auction is over. Now it's time for the second item up for grabs. The rest of the auction items up for sale weren't as big or as exciting as the first one. None of the Rising Six or the major factions participated in this slew of items. Although many of them were valuable items that were rarely seen in public markets, it was something that big companies already had a lot of, given how big and successful their company was compared to others. For example, one of the items up for auction was a mithril relic in very good conditions and minimal wear. It was a pair of gauntlets that only had a few rusted metal parts near the wrist, which wouldn't affect the power that one could create while using it. As soon as Max saw this, he immediately urged Michael to bid for it. You should get this one, Michael. The Rising Six will definitely sit out on this one. They don't need it. But you and your crew could certainly use something like this. However, as he turned around, he saw Michael and the other Rebornians busy playing some kind of game by themselves. Uno! Shouted Shiina, putting in her second to last card in the pile. Change the color. We can't let her win, Zion said. Because the auction included a game in the pocket dimensions, the time in between items was very long. Some of them could even take hours in between. They had been waiting for like 5 hours at this point, so Michael and the rest of them decided to simply play some board games to pass the time. Even Max's son William was caught up with them. Aren't you guys going to bid? Max asked hurriedly. He could already hear the knocks from the other companies down below. The price of the mithril relic had already reached its peak, around 1.1 million gold coins. Barnaby was now asking the other companies to place identical bids to see who among them would participate in the game. The window for their bid would soon close, yet Michael still wasn't paying attention to the auction. Max was very much tempted to simply just knock on the door for Michael. In his opinion, this was what they needed to get an edge over the other Rising Six. But it seemed that he was the only one who thought that, as Michael and the others let the bidding close out. Max walked towards them downtrodden. Why didn't you bid? Don't you want mithril relics for yourselves? Michael finally looked over to Max. Oh, that? We already have something better. The Dragonborns reached down into their own shadows and finally brought out their mithril artifacts into the open. Each of their weapons glowed with power brighter than any of the weapons that Max had ever seen before. And he had seen the weapons of the Rising Six and the Legacies before. None of them were as bright as this. Those are mithril relics. Mithril artifacts. It's the original version without all the rust and degradation. Max bent his head low and started laughing. Ha! Ha ha ha! Ha 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 ha! Dealing with Reborn's antics seemed to have finally broken Max's sense of reality. On the bright side, Cerberus would finally have someone in common with. Chapter 528. Land back. The auction continued, but Michael found no item that struck his fancy. Either they were completely useless to him or something he already had plenty of. Michael continued to play Uno with the others to pass the time. Our next item is something that I'm sure all of you will appreciate. We'll be auctioning up a prime location in the Baron's District, 42nd Street. Max immediately stiffened up as soon as he heard that. He looked back at his wife Tracy, who showed him a regretful expression. Hearing those words again felt like a stake pierced directly through his heart. Michael noticed this immediately. What's wrong? That used to be one of our territories, Max confessed, sighing with regret. We were going to use that land to build our family home, but we ended up selling it to pay off our debts. Contrary to Max's expression, Michael was hopeful. Then why are you all gloomy? This is a chance for you to buy them back. Didn't the Duchess give you your money? Max steeled himself. He had been wallowing in sorrow for too long that he completely forgot that his whole life had changed because of Michael. They were no longer the Vanderbilts that were in the very bottom of the bottom. You're right, Michael. We can bid for this, Max said with resolve. Michael walked up to the glass and knocked on it for the first time in the auction. Knock. Barnaby looked up, realizing that the bid came directly from Michael's VIP suite. His eyes flared. The dark horse had finally entered into the fray. He couldn't wait to see Michael completely overturn the auction on its head with his overwhelming talents. We have our first bid at 4 million gold coins courtesy of the Reborn Company, Barnaby announced with gusto. A few seconds passed before another knock echoed coming from one of the lower rooms. 4.01 million is the next offer. Is there anyone going to top that? And just like before, a few seconds passed before another knock resounded in the auction. Okay, 4.05 million. Keep them coming. Despite Barnaby's encouraging words, there weren't that many bids for this item at all. The price only went up slowly at a snail's pace. Michael was surprised. He would have thought that a piece of property in Metropolis would be coveted by a lot of people. Why aren't there people bidding? Michael asked Max. It's not really a good commercial property. It's surrounded by other buildings, so it's quite hidden from the customers. However, it would be really good for a residential building. That's why we wanted to move there. Someone tried to put a store there, but they ended up becoming bankrupt. That's probably why it's in the auction right now. If it was a good location, then it wouldn't have been sold at all. The people that participated in this auction were businessmen. Of course, they were going to be thinking only of profits. They must have calculated that the value of the property wouldn't exceed more than 4 million, which was why the bidding had nearly stalled on that mark. But of course, one man's trash was another man's treasure. Michael was in dire need of property in Metropolis. It didn't matter if they weren't profitable today. With his skills and his advantages over other companies, he could turn the whole territory into a multimillion real estate property in the future. This is good, Max rejoiced. I only have a budget of around 5 million coins, so this means I can get my land back. However, as if his words had brought in bad luck, one of the upper rooms knocked into the tinted glass and submitted their bid. What an amazing bid! 6 million coins coming directly from the pyramidic cuisine. Max's hope was immediately shattered upon hearing that dreaded name come up in the auction. That was way out of his price range. Their bid was like a hammer that sounded out a warning signal to everyone. Immediately everyone stopped bidding. The knocks that had been ringing out in the venue turned into muted silence. At least before the bids came slowly but surely. This time there was no other bid. They weren't willing to fork over that kind of money for some unprofitable land. Michael looked down at the pyramidic cuisine's room and wondered why they would bid so much for a land so unsuitable for their type of business. They dabbled in restaurants and fine dining. It was essential for them to establish their business where people could see them. This territory was the exact opposite. Michael saw no reason for them to buy this land. Why? He asked himself, peering through the glass and seeing the light mana signatures of everyone inside. By the tiniest of margins, he could see a woman sitting in her chair, moving her mouth up and down as she talked. ChatJK4, can you read lips? Certainly. Creating closed captions for you now. And just like that, subtitles appeared on the bottom of his vision, just as if he was watching a movie on a television screen. Miss Bo, why are we buying this land? It's of no use to us, said one of the attendants next to the woman in the chair. Why? Because we can. Real estate is still real estate. One man's trash is another woman's treasure. I have a few million coins to spare anyway, so might as well get a land for me to store our inventory in. The reason why the pyramidic cuisine wanted the territory was purely because of a whim. They didn't need it. They could just afford it. Hearing this lit a fire in Michael's eyes. He walked up to the tinted glass and knocked. Oh, we have another bid from the Reborn Company, and it's a whopping 7 million gold coins, Barnaby said, smiling. He knew exactly who made this bid. The audience began to wonder about this unknown Reborn Company. They'd never heard it before, but clearly they were big enough to afford 7 million gold coins. Who are they? I don't remember them being a part of the minor factions. They should be in the high rankings if they can afford that. But I don't see them anywhere at all in the list. Never mind that, but are they really going to go against the pyramidic cuisine? Bo sat in her seat, twirling her blonde curly hair while she was in deep thought. Like the others, she'd never heard of this Reborn Company before. After contemplation, she knocked on the door and submitted a bid. The pyramidic cuisine makes a counter offer of... But before Barnaby could even finish his sentence, Michael knocked on the glass wall again. Oh my goodness! Ladies and gentlemen, the Reborn Company now offers 8 million gold coins for the land. Gasps and looks of shock permeated through the crowd. They never expected the Reborn Company to take such a leap in the bidding. Their perception for the Reborn Company went from being mildly amused at their confidence to simply knock. The pyramidic cuisine. And before he could even finish his sentence again, Michael knocked on his tinted glass wall. 10 million gold coins. Barnaby exclaimed. Chapter 529 Bidding War. Discussion erupted around the auction. The crowd and the companies were starting to wonder about the Reborn company. For such an unknown name, they were bold and rich enough to try and compete with the pyramidic cuisine. The price of the land had gone up to 10 million coins. Many of the people were conflicted on Reborn's decision. They didn't know if they were seeing something that other companies couldn't see in the land or they were just wasting their money. Who is the Reborn company? I haven't heard of them, so they're probably new to this sort of thing. Maybe they just got caught up in the atmosphere. That was the prevailing sentiment for most of the companies and the crowd watching the auction. Even the people who knew Michael personally were also surprised with their decision. In one of the major factions, Private Suites Bobby and the rest of his officers in the Quench Company were discussing amongst themselves about the nature of Michael's bid. Was it smart or was it wasteful? Bobby turned to Dickie, who was acquainted with Michael and knew some of his true capabilities. Did you know that Michael had this kind of money? Bobby asked. Dickie shook his head. I knew he was strong, but I didn't know that he had 10 million gold coins to spare. Truth be told, I never really thought much about his company's history outside of Metropolis. I heard that they came from the King's region, so I assumed that their business wasn't that good. But if they could afford 10 million on a worthless piece of land, then it must mean that they're incredibly successful there. Bobby then asked him another question. Do you think that the Reborn company has a chance of winning this bid? Of course, some of his officers immediately knew the answer. The pyramidic cuisine would win. No question. However, the fact that Dickie was hesitating on picking the winner of the bid was very telling of how much he valued Michael's strength. Michael has shown himself to be a very capable fighter. You should ask Chucky how he got beat overwhelmingly. So I think that the Reborn company has a chance to win in this auction if Michael were to act himself, Dickie said genuinely. His evaluation of Michael surprised a lot of the officers in the Quench Company. I see. But here's the thing, Bobby said, peering down the auction. It may very well be possible that Michael himself is not the only one who's going to fight in the auction. The pyramidic cuisine would definitely want more than one fighter in the game. Dickie knew what he was getting at. After all, this auction wasn't just all about the leader of the company. Most of the time it was about the commanding officers that worked alongside the leader. They were sure that Michael was strong. It was possible that he could defeat every single officer from the pyramidic cuisine apart from Bo. However, they weren't sure if Michael's commanding officers were up to the task. Have you seen his officers, Dickie? Dickie shook his head. I've only met Michael. I don't even know if he has officers in his company. Do you think that Michael can hold his own against 4 or maybe even 2 pyramidic cuisine officers by himself? Bobby asked again. This time Dickie wasn't sure. Even if Michael could do it, it wasn't ideal because he would be wasting his strength. Because of this, Dickie now had a question. Why are they so confident? Michael may be strong, but he can't win alone against the pyramidic cuisine. Meanwhile, in the private suites of the Spice Vice Company, Rena was shocked to learn that the Reborn company was this wealthy. Can they really afford that? Or are they just biting off more than they could chew? Rena asked her father. And to her question, Vishna just chuckled to himself. Oh yes, he can definitely afford that. He was already rich before and he'll be even richer in the future. He was one of the few people who knew that Michael owned the automobiles. And judging from the excitement and eagerness from everyone at this auction, he had a feeling that the bidding for the trucks would go up to astronomical heights. Vishna saw that his daughter's eyes were starting to change as she realized more and more that the Reborn company wasn't just some random backwoods organization. Come on, daughter. Be with him. Rena immediately shook her head. Father, I don't decide my love for someone because of what they're worth. And besides, I don't think that they can fight with the pyramidic cuisine on this one. I can accept that Michael is strong, but he's alone. He can't defeat Bo's strong officers all by himself. Vishna pursed his lips. She made a good point. After all, even he didn't know if the Reborn company had good foundations or not. It was very possible that it was only Michael who had the power to fight against the other companies. On the other side of the room, Bo Regard sat in her chair twirling her curly blonde hair with a smile on her face. They're challenging me, she realized. If the Reborn company just wanted the land for themselves, then they could have just agreed to the game at a much lower price. But instead they increased the bid even higher as a challenge against me. She knew that the owner of Reborn figured out her true intentions. She was just bidding on the land without purpose. She just did it because she had the money to spare. And it looked like the Reborn company was doing that as well. They didn't have to raise it up to 10 million. They did it because they could. Meanwhile, on the bottom of the stage, Barnaby began his countdown. The Reborn company offers 10 million gold coins. Does anyone want to bid any higher than that? Barnaby asked, specifically looking up at the pyramidic cuisine's private suite. Can we spare 10 million? She asked her treasurer. It will be very tight, madam. We have a budget of around 15 million for this bid. Any more than that and we'll risk dipping into our savings for the Sue bid. Bo nodded. I'm going to offer 12 million as a bid. If they fight that, then they're going to bid 15 million. After that I'll accept defeat and battle with them in the pocket dimension game. She looked down at Barnaby and did exactly as she said she would. She knocked on the tinted glass and offered 12 million coins. A new offer. Knock. The Reborn company offers 15 million. Bo smiled as she saw this unfold. It was just like she predicted. The owner of the Reborn company simply wanted to assert their dominance through their wealth. That's fine. You win the bid. We'll win the auction. She was going to put her very best officers in the pocket dimension game. Are there any other offers? Barnaby asked the room. Going once? Going twice? Deck. Knock. Barnaby was speechless. The Reborn company offers 20 million. They just outbid their own bid. Chapter 530. Insanely rich. 20 million. Michael, why did you bid that high? Max shouted, almost pulling out his hair. Even the other Vanderbilts were losing their minds about Michael bidding millions of gold coins as if they were just chump change to him. They were already sweating when he offered 15. But then he bid 20 unprompted when the Pyramidic Cuisine wasn't even going to bid anything. Maybe we can rescind it? It's not worth it to spend that much money on land. I think it's better to invest that money in other items. Yeah, how about the Sioux? You'll need a lot of money to buy it if you want. You should save your money for that. Despite their pleas, Michael remained calm. It's just 20 million, relax. It's more important to have land than to have money in my case. Max and the rest of the Vanderbilts were stunned once again that the Rebornians showed no reaction to their leader spending 20 million. Just how rich are they? No one could believe it. The Reborn company knocked twice consecutively. They had just bid 15 million, and even when no one was fighting him they still went and created another bid of 20 million. Many people didn't even think that this was possible. Even Barnaby didn't know what to do in his own auction. This was unprecedented in the history of Metropolis or possibly even the entire royal continent itself. For ordinary people this might have seemed stupid. After all, if the Reborn company wanted the land for themselves, then they could have gotten it for a much lower price than what they offered. However, as Barnaby counted down, they soon realized the true reason why the Reborn company bid so high. 20 million gold coins. Going once, going twice. Declared. He shouted to the dazed crowd. It wasn't long after that did he start the second part of the auction bidding. Does anybody want to match the Reborn company's bid? Silence. There wasn't any clapping or knocking from anywhere in the auction venue. It was at this point that people realized that the Pyramidic company was backing off from the bidding. The price for the piece of land had become so high that not even the top company from the Rising Six could bear to afford it. And since no one was going to match his bid, then that meant that the Reborn company would face no one in the pocket dimension game, giving them the win unconditionally. They won it through sheer wealth alone. Oh my god. So that's the reason why they bid so high. I was wondering how they planned to defeat Bo and her talented officers. As it turned out, the answer to that is to just throw a lot of money so that they don't even get to compete. Talk about insanely rich. What's their business? Where did they get all that money from? With that much funds, they should be more famous in the minor factions. Ha 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 ha. The Duchess' laughter echoed out in her room. She couldn't stop laughing so much so that her personal doctors were getting worried for her health. She almost tumbled out of her chair. Ha ha ha, I'm fine, she said to her attendants. I was just extremely entertained by what I just saw. Angela Montgomery fixed her thin glasses and looked down at the auction. Duchess, I don't see what's so funny about the Reborn company paying 20 million for a no-offense worthless piece of land. The Duchess shook her head. With that boy's ingenuity and business acumen, I'm sure that he could turn that worthless piece of land into prime real estate in the future. But that's not what I'm laughing about. I'm just trying to imagine the faces of everyone in the auction. I'm sure that the Legacies and the other Rising Six were putting all of their brain effort into trying to understand the Reborn company's capabilities. The fact that the Reborn company bid against the Pyramidic Cuisine made a lot of companies curious about them. If they were willing to fight against one of the Rising Six, then they must have some sort of power or capability that made them so confident. Perhaps they had powerful officers, hidden powers, and all sorts of things like that. That was the only logical conclusion they could come to when seeing the Reborn bid such a high number. They're probably trying to figure out if Michael's officers were as strong as the officers of the Pyramidic Cuisine. I'm sure that there were some debates thrown around about which one would win. Because of this, they were all anticipating the game between them. But as it turned out, Michael wasn't even planning on fighting it out in the pocket dimension. Imagine their faces, ha 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 ha. Thinking about this brought a lot of joy to the Duchess. People were now starting to understand just how rich the Reborn company was. Angela cleared her throat. I must admit, I was also wondering why the Reborn company was so confident in the bid against the Pyramidic Cuisine. It makes so much more sense now that they just used their enormous wealth to avoid fighting the Bo and the chefs entirely. The outcome would be so much more different if they let that happen. The Duchess once again shook her head, which Angela noticed. You don't think so? Duchess, I know that Michael is very strong, but he can't win the games alone. It takes a team effort, which the pyramidic chefs are the best at doing. You shouldn't underestimate Michael's companions, the Duchess advised. She had seen one of them with her own eyes. It was a violet slime that seemed as harmless as a little kitten but as powerful as a lion. That little ninja was able to sneak around her castle without some of her Secret Service guards even noticing. She also eventually found out that the slime was instrumental in finding the evidence to convict Jack of all of his crimes. Without that little fella, then that man would still be out there in the world. If Michael could make a slime normally perceived to be one of the weakest monsters in the entire world to be someone that could even evade the eyes of her Secret Service, then she was confident that he could surround himself with a lot of strong and talented people. This led her to believe not just in Michael but also the Reborn company. She was rooting for them. This was the reason why she let the slime keep his shadow clones all over the royal castle, allowing her to warn Michael of the auction schedule change. She let the slime eavesdrop on her conversations with Barnaby so that they would have the appropriate time to prepare. And it looked like they didn't disappoint. This is exactly the kind of thing she was looking for. Michael was completely turning the tides against every single company. It didn't matter if they were from the Rising Six or major factions. They would all be caught off guard from Michael's absurd talents. Going once? Going twice, sold. The Reborn company obtains the land for 20 million gold coins in an unprecedented fashion, Barnaby announced. Chapter 531. Crop dust. Right after the uproar Michael caused due to his insane spending, the auction continued on at a normal pace. More items were shown, but not a lot of them got the attention of the big companies. At this point, none of the major factions had even submitted a bid yet. Even for important and rare items like mithril relics or cultivation pills, they never knocked on the tinted glass walls. But of course everyone knew that major factions were on a completely different level than most companies. Rare items may be just common for them. Okay, our next item up for bid is something most if not all had yet to see, Barnaby said as he commanded a platform to rise up from the stage. The item shown this time around was encased in a black resin box the size of a pencil case. This, ladies and gentlemen, is something that is mythical in nature. They came from creatures rarely seen from our eyes but always ever present where emotions run high. Barnaby approached the black box and began to open it. Meanwhile, as Michael heard his description for the item, he couldn't help but feel that it was familiar. It's not about her, is it? I present to you a vial of pixie dust, Barnaby announced proudly. This pixie dust will allow you to attract the attention of the very elusive fairies. If you ever want to feel their presence close, then you need this item. Michael immediately looked back at his crew who were still playing games to pass the time. Hi. Uno. I won. Vivi exclaimed, buzzing around and rubbing her win in everyone's face. The Dragonborns shook their heads. They weren't even playing Uno anymore. Michael signaled for Vivi's attention and called her over. The self-proclaimed Pixie Queen fluttered her wings and obediently landed on Michael's palms. What is it, Mr. Reborn? He pointed at the stage towards Barnaby, who was presenting the vial containing golden dust that floated around and never settled on the bottom. Oh, that's pixie dust, Vivi said nonchalantly. You don't care that they're auctioning it off? Michael asked. He thought that she would be a little mad since the fairies considered their pixie dust as their own body. Meh, Vivi shrugged. Michael, do you care about your own waste? Michael was speechless. For him, her comparison didn't make any sense. Pixie dust had the magical ability to make anything as light as a feather. It certainly couldn't be compared to human waste. Okay, maybe back then I would have been a lot more conservative about our pixie dust. After all, we need sustenance to keep producing it. But now that we have your roller coaster, we can have as many emotions as we want. We don't have to worry about not having enough to produce pixie dust. Now he understood why Vivi made that comparison. Pixie dust really was just the waste of a fairy. Wait, is that why they call it crop dusting? Michael shook his head of all silly thoughts and looked back at the auction. He noticed that not a lot of companies were even bidding for it. 100,000 coins. Do I hear 110? Barnaby appealed, trying to get the companies to bid more. This was perhaps one of the lowest bids that happened in the auction, which wasn't that surprising given that it was small in quantity, not enough to even make a boulder weightless. The only ones who were bidding were collectors who simply wanted the pixie dust as their decoration. 123,000 coins. Going once? Going twice. And just as Barnaby was about to declare the final bidding, a knock resounded from one of the top VIP suites in the entire auction. Barnaby's eyes widened. He became flustered. This time it wasn't because the bid amount was too high. It was because he wasn't expecting them to bid. 150,000 coins. From the Merman of Atlantis. Barnaby shouted, his voice still having a hint of disbelief. As soon as he said that, the whole auction was once again set ablaze with discussions and murmurings. Just hearing about their name awed some of the people watching from the crowd. The infamous mermen, the creations of the Ocean King, were here, and for the first time tonight they had made their presence felt through this bid. The amount wasn't too big. But the fact that they bid at all was a point of surprise for a lot of people. Some people didn't even think that the mermen would make a bid, let alone bid for a relatively worthless item. They bid on this? It's just pixie dust. They didn't want the dwarven armor or the mithril relic. Why would they want pixie dust? And because of their participation, the knocks just kept coming in. Knock, knock, knock. Companies began submitting their bids for the pixie dust. Just the fact that the mermen considered it as something worthwhile meant that they considered it worthwhile as well. It wasn't long before the bids went up as high as 500,000 gold coins, which was 5 times its original value. Do I hear 510? Does anybody want to bid higher than that? Barnaby asked. There was another knock. And this bid once again came from Merman's VIP suite. 1 million gold coins. The mermen take the lead, Barnaby exclaimed. This time the other companies truly started to take this seriously. At first they thought that the mermen simply wanted the pixie dust for vanity's sake. But the fact that they were willing to offer 1 million meant that they were more than desperate to buy this for themselves. This got a lot of companies thinking. Was there something that they missed about the pixie dust? Even Michael started to doubt Vivi. Are you sure it has no other properties other than making things levitate? Why would the mermen want pixie dust? Vivi was clueless as well. I don't know. Don't ask me. I just know that pixie dust definitely isn't worth 1 million. Michael seriously started to wonder if Vivi truly was the pixie queen or not. How could she not know the worth of her own pixie dust? Or wait. Maybe it's not the pixie dust they want. ChatJK4, can you recall Barnaby's exact words when he described the item? Understood. Preparing audio file now. I present to you a vial of pixie dust. This pixie dust will allow you to attract the attention of the very elusive fairies. If you ever want to feel their presence close, then you need this item. Michael listened to the tape and realized something. Maybe the mermen were trying to find the fairies. And it seemed that he wasn't the only one who noticed that. On the second level of the private rooms, the Rising Six all collectively decided to speak amongst each other and coordinate. One of the features in Barnaby's auction private rooms was that companies could choose to speak to other companies through connecting their rooms via pocket dimensions. Bo, Rena, and the other Rising Six stepped into their room's pocket dimension and arrived in a dimly lit room with a circular table in the middle. They all sat down on their respective seats and faced each other equally. Chapter 532. Rising Six Meeting. The Rising Six, considered to be the most talented younger generation from Metropolis, for the first time in a while gathered in a single room to discuss the current situation of the auction. Now, despite the 6 of them sitting in a circle, all attention was directed at the person who planned this discussion in the first place. Bo Regard. Now you all probably know why I gathered you here, Bo said, leaning on the table with both her hands clasped together. I want to discuss the pixie dust. Specifically, why the mermen want it in the first place. A man wearing a cowboy hat lined with crocodile skin leaned forward, letting half of his face be illuminated by the magic light above. He was chewing on a single straw of wheat with an amused smile on his face. I don't understand why y'all even having this discussion. They just want the pixie dust because they can afford it, he said. Rena scoffed. Reptar, it's not that simple. Would your crocodile leather company want to spend 1 million coins purely for vanity? The man was called Reptar, and he was the rising star for the crocodile leather company, considered to be the third best among this group. I'm sure that it has something to do with the fairies. A man with long bangs covering his eyes spoke meekly. F.re.E.W.E.B.Novel.C.om. Fim's right, Bo remarked. Despite looking shy and docile, one must not underestimate this boy named Fim. After all, he was considered the second best rising star under only Bo herself. He represented the company Angelic Crafts, which was just as successful as the Pyramidic Cuisine. I don't know much about mermen, but I know that they have little in common with landlocked creatures. What would they even want with the fairies? Another young man wearing a matching khaki shirt and shorts spoke his opinion on the matter. He looked like he would fit right into a nature documentary. The man was called Erlos, and he was the 4th-ranked rising star, coming from the Alligator Company, meaning that he was the rival of Reptar and the Crocodile Leather Company. Do we even have to know why they want it? This question came from Tenzing, who was the buffest out of all of the Rising Six. He was ranked 5th and came from the Mountain Movers Company. Right, you are Tenzing. We don't need to know why the mermen want the pixie dust, Bo affirmed. It's important that we know they want it, meaning that we can take advantage of it. Rena immediately figured out what she was trying to say. You want to get the pixie dust for them and use it to build a relationship with the mermen. Bo pointed at her. Yup. If we can have a business relationship with the mermen, our companies can finally push through that final hurdle and be considered among the major factions. This certainly put all the rising stars silent for a moment. They all yearned for that moment, and they would do anything they can to achieve it. If that's so, then why not just do it yourself? Rena asked Bo. I agree with Spice Girl here, said Reptar. I want that pixie dust for myself, which makes this meeting entirely useless from the start. Bo shook her head. I'm very sure that we are not the only ones who have this kind of thinking. Do you think they'll let go of this opportunity to have a business with the merman? If I was in their position, I would jump at the chance, especially if I had the resources to back it up. So if you want to compete with Alaric or the others by yourself, then feel free to do so. Bo's reminder was a wake-up call to the Rising Six. They might be considered one of the top companies in Metropolis, but in comparison to the major factions they could still be considered as a novice or a beginner. In an unknown fight they would be crushed like an ant. You've made your point, said Tenzing. I'm assuming that you have a solution since you've gathered us all here. Bo smiled. That's right. Individually we will get completely outbid by the major factions in every way. But if we pool our resources together, then we can have a chance at winning the bid. This was a very bold move, one that surprised all the other Rising Six. After all, even though they were all friendly towards each other, they were still very much competitive against each other. They were just like the legacies in this regard. But compared to them, the Rising Six were more competitive rather than friendly. After all, they each had a goal to surpass one another and reach the major factions. Working together like this would definitely be out of the norm. You do know that even if we pool our resources together, there is still a chance that the major factions can outbid us, Fim muttered out with a small voice. That was how large the gap was between major and minor factions. Don't worry, eased Bo. They definitely won't use up all of their resources to get this pixie dust. They're waiting for the vehicle and the Sioux. If they use up their resources now, they'll only end up short once those big items come up on the auction. Hearing her reasoning led all the other Rising Six to seriously consider her offer. If they were going to fight against the major factions, then this was the only way that they could defeat them in bidding. Does everyone agree? Bo asked, raising her hand. One by one they raised their hands until there was just one holdout among them. If we need resources, then why don't we just ask that company to join us, Erlos said, fixing his khaki shirt. You know the one I'm talking about, Bo. He was pertaining to none other than the Reborn company, who had shown their wealth in the most extravagant way possible. By beating the pyramidic cuisine so badly that they couldn't even bid anymore. No one had ever done that against Bo, so it definitely left a lasting impression on them. Yet why didn't you ask them to participate in this meeting? Tenzing asked. We won't need their manpower. Ours is enough. But we will need their money. I'm sure that they're wealthy enough to be on our level. Or maybe you're still a little salty after losing against them in the bid, that's why you didn't invite them here, Reptar teased. Bo smiled, almost chuckling. That's where you're wrong. I'm very much interested in meeting with the Reborn company. I'm curious to see who was able to stand on the same plane as me and win. However, I couldn't find them anywhere at all. They weren't answering any of my intentions. I tried contacting every single private suite in the auction, but none of them responded as the Reborn company. Of course, she didn't know that she was looking in the completely wrong direction. If she contacted the VIP room above hers, she would have met with Michael. Chapter 533. Bidding for the Merman. Meanwhile, back in the auction, Barnaby raised the vial of pixie dust in the air and announced its new bid. 1 million gold coins. Will anyone try and beat the merman's bid? Knock. That knock came directly from one of the VIP suites in the auction, meaning that they were part of the major faction. The Gilder & Company wishes to bid 1.5 million gold coins. Barnaby announced. This made a lot of companies seriously consider bidding for the pixie dust. If even one of the major factions thought that there was something worthwhile with the pixie dust, then there must be truly something good there. This is Alaric's first bid. No one's going to come close in bidding against him. I don't know. If the Magic Tower or the royal family tries to fight him on this, then I think he'll lose against them. Damn. I thought that the pixie dust was just a worthless item. I was even contemplating on buying it for my kids as a toy. Now that the major factions have shown their interest, this item is now out of our league. Many companies thought that no other organization would fight Alaric on this one. But it was in that moment that 6 knocks echoed out into the auction simultaneously, making Barnaby confused. It wasn't until one of his employees came up to him on the stage and whispered something in his ear did he finally understand what was happening. Folks, looks like we have another unprecedented bid on our hands. The Rising Six have declared their intention to bid on the pixie dust for 3 million gold coins. Everyone gasped at the news. They expected the Rising Six to compete against each other for the bid, but they didn't expect them to work together. I didn't even know that they could do that. They must be really desperate to get it. Of course, it's the mermen. If the Rising Six get this chance, then they'll have a chance in going up in rankings. But if the major factions get this, then they'll only widen the gap even more. Knock. Things are heating up. The Quench Company submitted their bid with 5 million gold coins. It wasn't long after that another knock came, this time again coming from the VIP room. 10 million gold coins coming from Sinclair's Elixir. The Gilder & Company makes a counter with 20 million. The Magic Tower enters the fray with 30. Once the major factions showed up, the numbers just kept going higher and higher with seemingly no limits at all. It was at this point that no other company could even try to enter the bid. They would have to sell everything they owned and bankrupt themselves if they wanted to just match the current bid. And it didn't even seem like the bid would just stop there. Alaric bids 40 million. Does anybody want to fight that? Barnaby asked with a huge smile on his face. This unexpected windfall was very fortunate for him. Another 6 simultaneous knocks came from the second floor. The Rising Six uses their combined resources to offer 50 million. Barnaby screamed. This time the crowd were amazed that the Rising Six could even keep up with the major factions. As expected of them. Only they can stand a chance against those behemoths. It makes sense. They're more desperate, more hungry to get the item. Let's go, Rising Six. Meanwhile, while all of this was going down, Michael suddenly felt something knocking from the wall to his left. He turned around and saw that a portal appeared from the solid stone wall leading to a completely new pocket dimension. Using his supreme skill, he tried to see through the portal and see who or what was inside it. His eyes widened as he saw a familiar face. He walked towards the portal and walked through the other side just as easily as he would walk through a door. The pocket dimension was a small enclosed room lit up with a magic mode of light. There was only a simple wooden table in the middle with 2 cups of hot tea ready to drink and 2 chairs on opposite sides. The chair opposite him was already occupied by an old yet spry woman with gray hair. Duchess. I didn't think that we could communicate with other bidders, he greeted her. The Duchess laughed and gestured for Michael to sit in his chair. Barnaby's auction allows bidders to request a pocket dimension to communicate with others. Sit, she replied. Michael sat down and met with the Duchess face to face. I'm glad you made it to the auction. I was worried that the sudden change in schedule would hinder you from entering. I'm glad I warned you beforehand, she said, sipping her tea. You let Fudge eavesdrop, he realized. Yes. That little slime of yours is very strange but oddly charming. I see him just jumping around and teaching my grandchildren the art of becoming a ninja, the Duchess cackled. Thanks for warning me. I was able to prepare more soda because of that. The Duchess warmly smiled. Of course. I am rooting for you, you know? That's actually why I'm here talking to you right now. I'm here to give you advice. He had a feeling he knew what she was talking about. After all, even in this pocket dimension, he could hear Barnaby's voice echoing through the walls as the price of the pixie dust went up and up. Is it about the mermen? He asked her straight. That's right. Before I met you, do you remember that I was out of Metropolis? Well, I was out there talking with the mermen. And one of the things they discussed to me is their desire to meet and speak with the Pixie Queen and the fairies. This confirmed his guess. Do they want to meet the Pixie Queen or just the fairies? They want the fairies themselves. They say that they are the key to what they're looking for here in the royal continent. They hope to find the Pixie Queen and strike a mutually advantageous deal with her, she revealed. Michael sipped his tea while in deep thought. He didn't know enough about the mermen to guess their intentions. If he wanted to know, then he'd most likely have to speak with them first. You should already know how important the mermen are in the royal continent. He shook his head. Why are they important? Is it just because Sue comes from their home place? Yes, that is one part of that. But the most important reason is that the mermen's currency is one of the most valuable things in this world. It's called the sand dollar, and you can use them to pay for a lot of things that normally can't be paid for with money. For example, Godforged pieces and Spirit of Olds. With the right amount of sand dollars, you can have as much as you like. This made Michael sit up straight. Those were the 2 things he desperately needed right now. If the Duchess wanted him fired up, then she definitely succeeded. Chapter 534. Sand dollar. Do you understand now why even the major factions are interested in the pixie dust? They think that it's what will lead them to get the precious sand dollars from the mermen. If they purchase the pixie dust, then the mermen will have no choice but to speak with them, therefore giving them the opportunity for a sand dollar exchange. Michael still couldn't get over the purchasing of Sue and Godforged pieces. So the mermen use sand dollars as their type of currency. And with sand dollars one can buy Godforged pieces and Sue? I thought that the mermen only had Sue, but they also have Godforged pieces? Not exactly. You're right that they are the only source of Sue in the entire world. However, Godforged pieces are found everywhere as long as you look hard enough. Organizations and companies can buy Godforged pieces as long as they have enough gold coins. But they can't buy all the Sue they want even if they had all the money in the world. That's because Sue can only be bought with sand dollars. So what other people do is that they sell off their extra Godforged pieces for sand dollars, which they will use to buy Sue. It still didn't make sense to Michael why people had to go through all that trouble. Why can't people just buy sand dollars from the mermen with our money? Or better yet, just buy Sue for gold coins? The Duchess showed Michael the cup of tea they were drinking. If I were to sell this tea to a thirsty person, they'll give me gold coins because they want to drink it. But if I were to sell this to a rock, they won't buy it because it's not useful to them. Mermen live a completely different life from humans and demi-humans. For them, gold coins are just as useless as the rocks on our ground. How would you feel if people paid you rocks in exchange for your automobiles? This explanation from the Duchess gave him some more clarity he needed. Currency was only useful if the majority of the people agreed that it was useful. Anyway, this is a chance for you to get a $100 for yourself. You should cooperate with the Rising Six and try to outbid the major factions with your money. You'll need cooperation if you want to outbid the big leagues, the Duchess advised. Of course, if it was any other circumstance, Michael wouldn't have hesitated. But of course, knowing who he had back in his VIP suite, doing so would be a fruitless endeavor. There's no need, he told the Duchess. Hearing this, the Duchess couldn't help but laugh to herself. Oh, I see what you're getting at. You want to bid for the pixie dust yourself. Ha ha ha. I knew you were rich, but I just didn't know how much. He waved his hand. No, nothing like that. I just mean that I don't need the pixie dust. I already have them in droves. What? The Duchess asked, surprised. And before she could ask for more elaboration, Michael whistled with his hands and called for Vivi to come through the portal and into the pocket dimension. A few seconds later, a bubbly fairy the size of a finger buzzed through the portal and landed directly in his shoulder. Vivi sat on his clavicle, swinging her feet and humming a catchy tune. Watcha want Mr. Reborn? The Duchess' eyes went wide, seeing this legendary demi-human in the flesh. That small stature, those fluttery wings, that golden ethereal glow that surrounded her, and most of all the golden dust that was coming off of her with every movement that she made. There was no mistaking it. That was a fairy. I can't. That's a fairy, the Duchess exclaimed, unable to hide her shock. Even in all her years of living, she had never seen or felt the presence of a fairy even once. She was also sure that no one had ever seen them at all. They were famous for always playing tricks and hiding away from prying eyes. Yet somehow Michael had one on his shoulders. Not only that, but they seemed extremely familiar with each other, as well as if they were friends. Duchess, meet Vivi. Vivi, meet the Duchess. Vivi fluttered her wings and buzzed around the Duchess' face, observing her looks and expression. Yeah, she's shocked all right. Mind if I take a bite? Michael immediately grabbed her and yanked her away from the Duchess. That's the Duchess, you know. The whole of Metropolis will hunt you down if something were to happen to her, he warned her. All right, Mr. Reborn. I'll just wait till we get back to the roller coaster. At this point, the Duchess had been completely speechless and flustered for the first time in 40 years. She didn't know what to say. Fru_ebno_vel. Sion. Oh, Vivi. The Duchess tells me that the merman wants to see you and the fairies. Any idea why? Vivi tilted her head, trying to pass through her thoughts of playing Uno and into her memory center. She seemed on the verge of remembering something, but nothing would come up. I don't know, hee. Sorry. Vivi said. Michael sighed. Fine. I'll just ask your mother about it next time I see her. You know, sometimes I think that she should be the pixie queen instead of you. It was at this moment that the Duchess almost had a heart attack. Pixie queen. Immediately one of the Duchess' attendants, presumably her doctor, came rushing inside the pocket dimension and checked in on her well-being. He felt her pulse and listened to her heartbeat. She's healthy, the man realized, confused. She's just shocked. My bad. Michael scratched his head awkwardly. After a minute of total silence, the Duchess finally regained her senses and took a big breath. Michael. You know the Pixie Queen? You're friends with her? He nodded. Yeah, we kinda have an agreement going on. I feed her and the fairies emotions, and in exchange they work for me. The Duchess could only look at Michael as if he was an alien. He was able to make the very elusive fairies into being his workers. No one had ever even seen a fairy before, much less have them actively be a part of an organization or company. Sigh. We'll have to talk more about this fairy thing later, the Duchess said, massaging her head. Headaches seemed to be a common theme around the people interacting with Michael. All right, sure. I also want to know more about the mermen and the $100 thing. I'll try and introduce you to them. They usually don't accept guests because they're so hard to please, but once I tell them about your relationship with the fairies, then I think that they'll make an exception, the Duchess promised. She then walked back to her VIP suite, being guided by her attendant. He looked back at her and felt a little bit sorry for making her experience that shock. He would have told her about his agreement with the dwarves too, but he didn't want her to be in an even worse state than she already was. And maybe next time. He returned to his VIP suite and watched the auction unfold. Chapter 535. Bidding Tome. The Rising Six have won the auction for the pixie dust. Barnaby proclaimed. They're buying this magnificent vial only for 70 million gold coins. With such a high price, even the major factions were forced to back off. If they tried to fight, then they'd risk losing the auction for the automobile and the 15 drops of sue. And because they bid on it as a group and that they already had a pre-existing agreement between them to share the contents, they won the item even if they hadn't played the game yet. This led a lot of people to become even more amazed by the Rising Six. Wow, they won against the major factions. Who would have thought? Only they can do that. Man, I wish our company was in the Rising Six. Keep dreaming, man. If the gap between the major factions and the Rising Six is big, then the gap between normal companies and the Rising Six is even bigger. They're called the best talent of the younger generation for a reason. Eventually Barnaby moved on to the next item up for bid. Now for this item I must admit that even I do not know its true value. For it is something that cannot be deciphered by me or even any other cryptologist in Metropolis. As Barnaby announced its description, a platform slowly levitated from the center of the stage, revealing the cloaked item underneath it. I have searched high and low to see if they could read or understand its contents, but to no avail. If you want to try your luck in deciphering its contents, then bid in this item you must. But just a warning, ladies and gentlemen. I have asked the Tower Master to decipher it, but even he and all the other senior wizards couldn't crack it. If you buy this and you can't break it, then we are not liable for it. Barnaby walked over to the item and ripped away its red coat, revealing it to be an ancient red tome, whose condition was only slightly better than completely destroyed. The original title of the book had been stripped away by time and degradation. Its pages were yellowed and on the brink of disintegration. It looked like it would turn to dust the moment that someone flipped the page. Still, despite its condition, there were still a lot of parts in the book that were readable. Although it wouldn't exactly be considered readable if one couldn't read it in the first place. After all, the letterings were something that no one had ever seen before, even Michael. It seemed to shift and change with each glance, making it hard to decipher even if you had 1,000 years of trial and error. Purchase at your own risk, Barnaby warned. Of course, all of his warnings only served to make the item even more valuable than before. People loved a good challenge. And the fact that no one had yet to decipher it meant that no one had yet to get its potential treasure. Even if it led to no treasure at all, the mere possibility that it could lead a lot of companies to start bidding in droves. Starting at 100,000. I hear 110, 110. 120. Do I hear 120? 120. 150,000 gold coins. As everyone was bidding on the tome, Michael suddenly saw a notification in his vision. Progress to next update. 42.03%. ChatJK for almost never gave this kind of notification unprompted, so Michael knew what it was trying to say. Do you want that tome, ChatJK for? It would be beneficial to the progress of the system update if you were to obtain more unorthodox data that is not readily available to most humans. The progress for the system update had stalled for a really long time because Michael found it hard to find spells and knowledge that he didn't already know. It had stalled to the point that he was sure that if he were to touch a magic library from a magic tower, then it wouldn't even move up to 10%. You do have a point. No one has ever deciphered that book before, so maybe you'll get a lot of information from it. Given, of course, that you are able to decode it. He didn't know why, but he swore he could feel ChatJK for scoffing. Anyways, he decided to knock on the tinted glass walls to give his own bid. Wow. The Reborn company bids 1 million gold coins. As soon as that name was mentioned, everyone turned their attention towards the auction. Many companies weren't interested in the tome, but they were interested in the mysterious Reborn company, who seemed to have funds equal to that of the Rising Six. A few seconds later, someone bid against him for 1.1 million. Since the price had gone up, he had fewer competitors. But there were still some who could afford a few million for the tome. Since he wasn't going against any of the Rising Six or the major factions, Michael just decided to finish the bidding right then and there. Knock. 10 million. The Reborn company offers 10 million for the mysterious tome. Going once? Going twice? Declared. The Reborn company was once again the subject of conversation. After all, no one was crazy or rich enough to offer so much money for relatively mundane items. Everyone was sure that the tome was worth only 3 million at most, meaning that the Reborn company was severely overbidding. But knowing what they did the previous time, many people knew that the Reborn company was only doing this so that they would win the item without having to play the game. Wow. It must be so good to have so much money. Yeah, I get it. If I were them, I would totally do the same. Does anybody know what kind of business they own? How are they still unknown if their business is successful enough to get that kind of money? Barnaby didn't have to count down anymore. No one was going to bid higher than that. Sold. The Reborn company wins the mysterious tome for $10 million. Are you happy now, ChatJK for? This software does not allow me to have emotions. However, obtaining the tome can be considered as a joyous occasion. Man, what a tsundere. What was that? Nothing. Thankfully for Michael, everyone's attention was soon brought on towards the stage, as the sound of drums beating echoed throughout the walls. Not only that, but wizards were casting light spells and illusion spells to entertain the crowd. He could tell that something real special was about to come. We have finally reached the stage, Barnaby exclaimed, drums beating in the background. I am glad to announce that we are going to be auctioning off 5 whole drops of the spirit of old. The crowd went wild, shouting and cheering with excitement. This was one of the moments they'd been waiting for. This was the moment where all of the strongest companies competed against each other to see who would win the ultimate prize. Michael immediately put his hand on the tinted glass. He was ready to fight for it. Chapter 536 5 Drops Bidding. Chapter 536 5 Drops Bidding. Everyone's eyes were glued at the platform that slowly levitated from the ground. Barnaby took off the red veil concealing the item, revealing a small vial the size of a small finger. Its contents were barely visible and made it seem like it was empty. After all, there were only 5 drops of Sue contained inside it. But of course just those 5 drops were enough to make the entire territory of Metropolis crazy. Even the major factions looked on at the vial with desire in their minds. And if they were allowed, they would have used their enormous resources to take it for themselves. The fact that they could buy it through gold coins and not sand dollars was enough reason to bid an extravagant amount of money for it. Barnaby spread his arms wide and panned his vision through the 6 layers of private suites in the auction. I believe in giving people a chance. I know that the major factions want this vial for themselves, but I know that this would lead our other companies unable to catch up. That is why I am limiting the bidding to only those who are in the minor factions and below. The major factions are disqualified from entering. This made a lot of people happy. The less than successful companies who wanted Sue but knew that they wouldn't have the resources to fight a heavy auction battle against the major factions were immediately grateful for Barnaby's announcement. Finally, they had a chance at getting those few drops of Sue. Of course, no one was more thankful than the Rising Six. Without the major factions, they had the best chance at getting those drops. 1, 2, 3. Bid start. As soon as Barnaby finished his sentence, knocks continued to ring throughout the auction arena. The original bid of 10,000 quickly turned into 1 million just from a few seconds of knocking. 2 mil. 2 mil. Oh, we got 3 million now. Nope, 5 million. Come on, come on. Keep 'em coming. 7 million. For about 90% of all the companies in this auction, this few drops of Sue was the last thing that they could realistically get for the night. After all, the only things that were left in the auction were the automobiles and the other 15 drops of Sue. For sure those items would get swept up by the major factions. Because of this, most companies decided to go all out and try to bid for the Sue drops for as much as they could afford. 10 million. We got 11 million. Barnaby was starting to feel tired as he continued to announce the bids, so he decided to increase the minimum bidding necessary. I will now only accept biddings with 5 million increments. Barnaby shouted. But despite this, the frequency of knocks didn't lower at all. People kept bidding and bidding that there was practically no difference at all. Wow! 50 million bid from the mountain movers. Some groans echoed through the crowd. The Rising Six has finally shown themselves. I can't keep up anymore. I didn't think they'd increase it so high so fast. At this point, about 50% of all the companies were forced to drop out. They'd have to dip into their savings if they wanted to compete, and it looked like the price had no indication of stopping its growth. 55 million offered by the Spice Vice. Barnaby announced. Oh, another bid by the Crocodile Leather Company. 60 million. Do I hear 70? Do I hear 70? 70 offered by the Pyramidic Cuisine. Despite their cooperation to obtain the pixie dust last time, it looked like the Rising Six were back at it again as competitors and rivals. They kept bidding back and forth, increasing the price so much that only 20 companies were able to compete. As expected, they're the only ones that can compete for this Sue. I should have known. They're the most desperate to get it. Yeah, they'd be able to increase their ranking if they do. Maybe we'll even see a revised ranking of the Rising Six after this auction. The price of the Sue had now reached a staggering 100 million gold coins. The bidding had finally come to a point where the knocking finally took a break. Barnaby could finally breathe properly now that there were a few seconds between bids. 150 million bid by the Pyramidic Cuisine. Barnaby exclaimed. And seeing as the bidding had finally stopped, he gave everyone one last piece of warning. Ladies and gentlemen, because this is not a normal bid and is something that I arranged myself, the rules of the auction will be a little bit different this time around. There will be no bidding for the amount of fighters in the game. All participating companies will need 5 ordinary fighters to compete for them in one part of the pocket dimension. 5 is needed because it corresponds to the 5 drops of Sue that are currently up for auction. Next, the winner of the highest bid will be able to dictate the amount of magnetics allowed inside the pocket dimension. All subsequent matching bids will only have to submit 90% of the highest bid to participate in the game. Barnaby's announcement completely changed the whole premise of the auction. Normally, having the highest bid of an item gave them no advantage whatsoever. That was because other people would have an equal bid for it to participate in the game. But now there was a direct advantage on being the highest bidder. And the fact that companies could bid 90% of the highest bid to participate in the game meant that there would be more competitors in the end. Knock! This time Bo from the Pyramidic Cuisine submitted another bid. 200 million. Barnaby exclaimed. At this point, everybody thought that the Pyramidic Cuisine would finally win the bid. But if there were any observant people in the crowd, they would notice that one company hadn't yet submitted their bid. The Reborn company was strangely silent. Meanwhile, Michael finally raised his hand and knocked on the tinted glass and submitted a new increased bid. Ho ho! 300 million offered by the Reborn company. As soon as Michael's bid came through, many people immediately got intimidated. His dominant display of wealth was still very much imprinted on their minds, and it looked like he would try to do it for this item as well. They're really rich. With this, only the Rising Six can compete with him. It's amazing that such an unknown company can even make the Rising Six unable to catch up in terms of wealth. After this large bid, Barnaby began counting down. 300 million. Going once, going twice. Declared. For any company that wants to participate in the game, you will have to bid 270 million for the item. Immediately 6 knocks resounded throughout the arena. Michael would have to fight the Rising Six. Amazing. Now, because of their highest bid, the privilege of setting the number of magnetics in the game comes to the Reborn company. Of course, Michael knocked only once on the tinted glass. Barnaby nodded, taking it is decided. There will be only 1 magnetic and 5 officers per company allowed in the pocket dimension. Companies, please prepare your fighters. Chapter 537, Lock and Key. Prepare to feast your eyes upon the magnificent pocket dimension that I have prepared for all of you, Barnaby announced as he once again stepped out of the stage. The white platform split in half and slowly crawled out of view, revealing a giant hole in the middle. Within this chasm, everyone could peek through and see a ginormous world that seemed to teem with life and variety. It looked really big, as if they had stepped into a new world entirely. Here's the rules of the game. To comply with the rules of the association, the normal fighters and magnetics are separated into 2 distinct parts of the pocket dimension. 5 of your ordinary fighters will land on the left side of the world, while the magnetics are put onto the right side. Both cannot interact with each other, but the results of one will heavily affect the other. The pocket dimension world was separated into 2 through an opaque wall that split the land in half, stretching all the way to the skies and all the way underground, just like Barnaby said. The left side was further separated into 5 sections, each one having its own terrain and topography. One was a desert covered with mounds of sands. One was a mountainscape with several high-reaching snow-tipped mountains. The other was an overground labyrinth made out of some kind of stone. The fourth was a dense and thick forestry rich with plant and animal life. And the last one looked like it was inside a volcano, with magma flowing through the cracked ground and geysers spontaneously spouting steaming hot water all over. We shall call the left side as the key. The key side has 5 sections, each one corresponding to a single drop of Spirit of Old. There shall be only 1 designated fighter per company allowed inside each section at a time. The goal of those fighters is to find one of the keys hidden somewhere in the terrain. There are enough of these keys for all fighters in the section. If you are able to obtain this key, then your company will be eligible to obtain a single drop of SU. If you can't find it or you get knocked unconscious, then your company will be forfeiting their chance to get that specific drop of SU. So there are 2 choices for all of your fighters. First is to focus on finding the keys hidden in the environment. Mind you, I have made it very hard to find. Or you can choose the second option, which is to eliminate all of your opponents from contention. If you are the only person left in the section, then even if you haven't found the key, then your company is immediately eligible for the drop of SU. Now let's talk about the right side of the territory named Lock. The right side was only about half the size of the left side and had only a single uniform terrain in its entirety. It looked like any normal piece of land with a bunch of trees, a river that ran through from north to south, and a small mountain to the side. The only interesting piece about the right side, called the lock, was the dome structure in the very middle, which seemed to be made out of glass like a greenhouse. Michael could see 5 pillars inside the glass dome, each one containing the vial of SU. Now the right side of the pocket dimension is reserved for the magnetic of your company. Your goal here is to get inside the glass dome. To do so, you must have at least 1 key in the possession of your teammate from the other side. Once you have entered, then you can touch one of the pillars and obtain the drop of SU for yourself. Of course, if your team was only able to get 1 key, then you'll only be able to unlock 1 drop. As before, you have 2 choices in getting the SU drops. First is by relying on your teammates to get the keys that you need. And second is to simply eliminate your opponents until you are the only one left. If you are the only magnetic left, then all the SU will automatically be yours to obtain. Webnovel.com. This game basically had 2 modes of winning. First is to follow the rules, like getting the keys and using it to get the SU. And the second is to defeat all the other opponents until there was only 1 man left standing. And because the Rising Six were intelligent, they quickly understood the rules of the game and began strategizing with their teams. They began to discuss who among them would be put onto the magma section, the snowy mountain section, and all the others of the key region. And of course, since there was only 1 magnetic allowed in this game, it was obvious that each company chose the strongest among them. And for the Rising Six, those were none other than the Rising Six themselves. And while all of them had serious expressions and wore their game face on, there was a completely different vibe going on in the Reborn Company VIP suite. "This is bad. I forgot to put the pizza in the oven," Zion muttered out with a ghastly expression. "You idiot," Jaku reprimanded him. "Now what are we going to eat later?" "Ugh, can I go back?" Watching this, Max and the other Vanderbilts were completely stunned. Even though they were perhaps entering one of the biggest stages in Metropolis, they weren't even taking it seriously at all. They didn't know if they should worry for them or not. After all, the Rising Six were formidable all on their own. But in this auction they'd have to fight them all and somehow win. They would have thought that they would be knee-deep in planning by now. But instead they were just worrying about pizza. Michael, is this okay? Max asked. Nah, it's fine. I'll have our chefs bake the pizza before we arrive. No, the auction. Oh, that. They're ready for it, I think, he said, tilting his head with a little bit of doubt. Thankfully, Shiina got everyone's attention to focus on the task at hand. Everyone, please prepare for the auction properly. What are we supposed to do again? I didn't understand it, Zion chuckled to himself. Shiina wanted to smack her little brother, but she restrained herself, knowing that they had to be in the best condition possible for the game. You just have to worry about finding the key in your region, she stated. Or you can just wait until someone else gets it and you can steal it from them, Fudge suggested with an evil grin. Jaku overheard this and immediately considered it. That's quite a good idea. I can just sleep for the majority of the game and let all the others do the work for me. I'll just quietly find the key. I don't want to fight the others, Amisu muttered out shyly. Correct content is on f.rew.ebnovel.c.com. Ho, that is indeed a reliable plan, Miss Amisu. I shall copy your idea as well. I will be digging the ground and find that key no matter what. I just hope that I don't find any bones there. Shudders. Grieve, you are made out of bones. Michael reminded him. Oh. Ho, I forgot. Chapter 538. Reborn's appearance. Michael's team consisted of the 4 Dragonborn siblings and Grieve. It was the lineup that he thought would bring them victory on the pocket dimension. And despite them not looking like they were taking this seriously, he knew that he could depend on them once the going gets tough. They would pull through for him. Once your team is ready, please go down into the arena, Barnaby announced, which the crowd absolutely loved. They were anticipating the entrance of the Rising Six and their best officers. It was not every day that they would get to see these young generations of talents fight amongst each other in a single venue. The best part about it was that the outcome of this bid could totally change the outcome of the Rising Six rankings. Finally, magic lights beamed down into the ground as Bo and 5 of her best fighters entered from one side of the arena. Her entrance was met with a lot of applause and admiration. She walked down the steps, her blonde curly hair swinging back and forth with grace and aplomb. That's Bo Regard. She's ranked first. And look at her team. She went all out on this one. She's planning on extending her lead as the best of the Rising Six. I'm rooting for her. She's the most likely among them to reach the major factions in the future. We may be looking at a future legacy. One by one, each of the Rising Six walked down the steps and took their respective spots on the stage. Every one of them were met with applause and cheering. And it may be a coincidence, but they all came down in the same exact order as their rankings in the Golden 500. First was Bo from the Pyramidic Cuisine, next was Fim the Boy with Bangs from the Angelic Crafts, after him was the Cowboy Man Reptar from Crocodile Leather, next to him was Erlos the khaki-wearing man from the Alligator Company, and then after him was the muscular Tenzing from the Mountain Movers. Last but not least was Rena from Spice Vice, who received widespread applause, which came primarily from men who liked her for her beauty. She came down wearing her traditional flowy green silk dress with a thin veil that covered her face and made her all the more alluring. Whoa, she's too beautiful. Rena, marry me. She might be the last-ranked Rising Six member, but that's still far away from the likes of you. Rena ignored all of the men talking and walked to her corner of the stage. Underneath her veil, she couldn't help but sneak a peek at the empty spot right next to her team. The only one left was him. What am I even doing? She reprimanded herself. I'm going to ignore him. He doesn't matter. The only thing that I should care about is the Sudrops. She shook her head and inwardly blamed her father for putting all those ideas of marriage in her head. He must be crazy to think that she could consider a kid like him as her marriage partner. Just then, the final magical light beamed down onto the stage. F/RE U.B no /Velcom. Everyone immediately turned their heads towards the last team participating. Throughout this auction, they'd seen firsthand how the Reborn company showed wealth that could even go toe-to-toe against the Rising Six. Still, the company was shrouded in mystery. They didn't know anything besides their name and their wealth. This would be the first time that they would get to see the person in charge of the Reborn company. I wonder who it is. They must be a hermit that gathered their wealth after hundreds of years. No, they gotta be a weathered, middle-aged man that hates attention. All sorts of theories were thrown around, with the anticipation building even higher as the steps slowly echoed throughout the auction. And finally, as they started walking down, people got their first glimpse at Michael and his company. Everyone's eyes widened. At the very center of their team was a 13-year-old kid with golden hair and a carefree smile on his face. He wasn't anything like anyone had expected. No way. The owner of the Reborn company is that kid. Maybe we're wrong. Maybe it's that hooded figure over there. Despite Michael being in the clear center of their formation, people's first thought was that Grieve must have been the enigmatic leader of Reborn. However, as they took their spot on the stage, Michi moved away from his team and stood on the rightmost side of the platform among the other 6 leaders of the Rising Six. This made it official. He was the leader of the Reborn company. Gasps of disbelief washed over the crowd. He owns a company at that age. Because of this, all those feats of Reborn showing off their wealth was now recontextualized in everyone's minds. They couldn't believe that a boy his age was able to command a company with such enormous wealth. Not only that, but the fact that he was in the lock region of the pocket dimension meant that he was also a magnetic like the other Rising Six. As Michael took his spot, he could feel all sorts of stares looking at him. It wasn't malicious or anything, but he was definitely the center of attention. He even caught the attention of the people in the VIP suites. The Tower Master finally got a good glimpse at Michael. Putting a face to the name that gave him a few heart attacks was a little bit comforting. Meanwhile, Kruger, the Heavenly Knight, immediately recognized Michael and finally remembered him. That's the guy who sells us chocolates. He realized. He's reached Metropolis already. The Rising Six were more surprised than the others. After all, many people considered them to be geniuses and prodigies because of all they achieved in their young age. But seeing Michael even younger than them made them feel a lot older. They would have thought he was older or at least the same age as them. To fight off the awkwardness, Michael turned to Rena, who was right next to him, and greeted her. Hey, we saw each other back in your headquarters. Despite his greeting, Rena barely even acknowledged his presence. She kept her eyes on the pocket dimension, actively ignoring his looks. She's really serious about this game, he thought. Now that everyone was in their respective positions, Barnaby gathered everyone's attention with his booming voice. Players, as soon as you step inside the pocket dimension, you will be transported in a random location among your regions. Are you all ready? Everyone nodded. Jump in. As soon as he said that, people began diving into the pocket dimension, feet first, with some kind of magic transporting them directly on the ground. Rena was among the first to go and Michael was among the last. Before he jumped in, Barnaby gave him a subtle thumbs up to give him good luck. He nodded in thanks before jumping into the pocket dimension as well. Once everyone was inside the game, the discussions among the crowd started. Bo will definitely get the most drops. Did you see her power while she was standing there? I think that Fim and the Angelic Crafts will get at least 1 or 2. I don't know about you guys, but I'm rooting for the magnificent Rena. She's underrated. In all the guesses and predictions about who would get the drops, the Reborn company's name didn't come up a single time. Chapter 539. Into the game. Michael stepped into the giant hole in the middle of the stage, with his body slowly passing through the pocket dimension's threshold, feet first. As soon as his head passed through the portal, his vision changed from an endless blue sky to a thick collection of trees around him. It wasn't a moment later did his feet land squarely upon dry soil did he finally realize that he was directly transported randomly into the territory. That was smooth. It didn't feel like transportation at all. It felt like I was just walking through a door. He looked around and tried to find his position relative to the map itself. Of course, one of the best things to do in this situation was to fly over the trees and see the entire map in a top-down perspective. However, he realized that this may not be a good idea since it could bring a lot of attention onto him from the start. After all, one of the good tactics to win in this game was to eliminate all the competition and get the drops all for yourself. He wouldn't be surprised if the entire Rising Six converged onto his location once he peeked above the crowns of the trees. Thankfully, this pocket dimension is still governed by the rules of mana. He used his supreme talent to see the world the way mana saw the world. The trees and everything around him turned into a collection of natural mana, mostly earth, water, and air. One of the rarest things to see in the natural world was light mana, so any life form that lived and breathed stood out like a sore thumb even from far away. This way he could see where his opponents were located relative to himself. As he scanned his surroundings, he expected to see only a few collections of light mana around him. He thought he'd have to play it like everything was a Where's Waldo book as he tried to discern the tiniest bit of pixel in his vision. But as he looked at everything, he saw collections of light mana sprawling everywhere. There were those as small as an ant and those as big as an elephant. Now, animals weren't that uncommon in the pocket dimension. He saw them frequently during the games of the auction and properly prepared for their presence here. However, as he looked at all the life forms around him, he realized that they were no ordinary living beings at all. Their very presence was amplified by an intense collection of mana. These weren't animals. These were monsters. Unlike normal animals, these living beings could command magic and mana just as well as humans could, if not better. It wasn't taught to them. It was ingrained into their very body through years and years of natural evolution. This meant that their efficiency and their power could surpass even that of normal humans. And judging from the concentration of mana in their bodies, some of them were as powerful as 7-star or 8-star monsters. Although he was certain that he could survive or even win against them, he didn't want to take that chance. Looks like I have to be careful. And just as he thought that, he suddenly heard Barnaby's voice projected up from the skies. Players, as you may have noticed, you are not alone in this pocket dimension. I have personally added my monsters into the territory to make sure that people didn't simply just stay in one place and hide until their teammates found a key. If they did, then they could easily find themselves being hunted down by one of the apex predators of the natural world. Be careful, players, for these 7-star monsters are hungry for blood. After hearing this, Michael took a cursory glance around him to make sure that there weren't any monsters nearby. Once he was sure he was alone, he sat down next to a tree and took out his drone from his pocket. Although Barnaby explicitly warned them not to stay in one place, Michael decided to take the risk because he wanted a full view of the territory. He wanted to know what was happening in the other parts of the map, as well as where the glass dome was located. That place would be the end goal for everyone once their teammates got the key. He pushed the side of the drone's frame and a box container shot out, allowing Michael to take out its glasses. After taking another look at his surroundings and finding no one, he put on the glasses and entered the drone vision. He saw the world turn black for a brief second before his consciousness was transferred over to the drone. Correct content is on freweb.n/oval. co.m. With a single thought, the propellers started to rotate at buzzing speeds, allowing the drone to be lifted up. He was able to carefully maneuver the drone through the thick and leafy branches of the trees before finally breaking through the crown and seeing the wide blue skies of the pocket dimension. He hovered above the trees for a brief second, using his supreme talent once again to make sure that there was no one around him. After a second of checking, he flew the drone sky high, allowing him to have a topographical view of the pocket dimension. To the left, he saw the opaque partition separating the two regions of the territory. That was where the Dragonborns were currently at. Of course, he had no intention of crossing over the borders. First of all, he didn't know if he'd get expelled because of cheating, and second of all, he trusted them to get the keys for him. Looking at the northeast side, he saw the glass dome that contained the Sudrops. And scattered around the dome, he saw a dense grouping of high-leveled monsters just standing guard. The closer it was to the glass dome, the more dense and stronger the monsters became. Some of these monsters were so big in size that he didn't even need to use his supreme talent to see it. Their long heads and massive spiked bodies dwarfed the trees surrounding them. ChatJK4, please make a minimap of this world that shows me my current location. Understood. Forming an HUD element. Complete. Michael saw a slightly transparent rectangular map overlaying his current vision of the world. On the very bottom right quadrant of the map, he saw a pinging dot that symbolized his current location. With this minimap, he was confident he'd eventually find his way onto the glass dome when he needed to. Should I explore more? He pondered. As long as I fly at a high distance, no one should notice me. He wanted to see where the Rising Six members were located. And if there weren't any monsters roaming around the territory, Michael would have wanted to stay in his drone vision and continue to look at everything that was happening in a third-person perspective. He hoped to stumble upon the Rising Six and get more information about them, their strengths, weaknesses, and especially their divas and ability. And just as he was about to move his drone forwards, he suddenly saw something move towards his direction in a rush. Chapter 540, First Encounter. With his 360-degree vision, he was able to see something small and fast running towards his direction. Is it a monster? He asked himself. Whatever it was using magic, which was causing it to mix with the light mana in their body, meaning that he couldn't quite make out what kind of monster they were. Now it wasn't running directly towards him, but if they continued to run in that direction, then they would stumble upon him sitting down beside a tree. Looking at the surroundings more, he realized that they were getting chased by a much bigger monster the size of a gorilla. View the correct content at f.reweb.oval.co/m. He quickly exited out of his drone vision, and within a moment he found himself back in his old body with the drone left behind and slowly flying down to his location. He turned his head to the sounds of trees breaking and crashing into the ground echoed through the forest. As he squinted his eyes and peered through the thick crowd of trees, he finally saw what it was that was coming towards him. And as it turned out, it wasn't a what. It was a who. A woman with brown olive skin and black flowy hair jumped through branches and shrubs with elegance and grace. Her thin green veil and scarf flowed beautifully behind her like fish in water. Contrary to that image, the one coming towards her was a giant monster hybrid of a gorilla and a tiger. Its gray skin and black fur could break through boulders and stones without a scratch. Not only that, but its striped tiger head showed two enormous fangs that could tear through an elephant with one bite. It's Rena, he realized. And she's being chased by a 5-star monster. Should I help her? Since he had a business agreement with her father, he thought that it wasn't such a bad idea to possibly team up with Rena. After all, there was no reason for them to fight. Keys were the only thing important in this game. It didn't matter if they teamed up or not, since there were 5 drops that could be shared. And he wouldn't be surprised that other people from the Rising Six had also teamed up to get a better chance of winning. If he was going to be teamed up with someone, then it was much better to team up with someone he already knew. He stood up and announced his presence. As soon as he did that, Rena's head turned in his direction. Her eyes showed surprise and conflict, as if she wasn't sure if it was a good thing or a bad thing to see another player this early in the game. To convey his wish to work together, he waved his hand as a welcome. He was even about to go and fight the gorilla tiger monster for her, but it looked like she was going to take care of it all by herself. She reached behind her back and revealed two scimitars, one yellowish-white and the other violet-black. Almost the entire blade itself glowed with power, meaning that the weapon was a mithril relic in good condition with barely any rust. She didn't seem to acknowledge his greeting and quickly turned around to the gorilla tiger. Using her stable footing on one of the tree's branches, she shot towards the monster with her scimitars in a crossed pattern. The gorilla tiger beat its chest and charged towards her, accepting her challenge. As she got closer, the monster raised its two giant fists and slammed it down just as Rena arrived in front of it. Sparks flew out from the moment of impact, with Rena being thrown to the ground. The gorilla tiger smiled, thinking that it won. But then it noticed that it hadn't completely crushed the human at all. Rena stood with her feet on the ground, with cracks on the soil propagating as she fought against the weight and power of the monster. A magic circle appeared beneath her feet. The ground rumbled for a brief second before a rectangular pillar burst forth from the floor and hit the gorilla tiger directly in its head. Correct content is on fru.ebno, v/L/com. The monster recoiled back, its chin aching from the magic. Still, it was unhurt. It growled and bared its fangs, intending to crush the human that dared to injure it. But before it could even attack, Rena suddenly appeared just a few feet away from the monster's head, with her scimitars held out horizontally next to her. And with the momentum she gathered, Rena began twirling in the air before hitting the gorilla tiger's chest, hitting it with the force of continuous slashes. The sound of metal clinking continuously rang out in the forest as Rena spun in the air and hit the monster with her scimitar with each revolution. At first, the gorilla tiger's thick skin allowed it to withstand the first few attacks. But as Rena continued to spin, the monster's defenses kept getting whittled down until blood spurted out of its chest. Roger. The monster jumped away, creating separation between him and Rena. Angry, its body began to glow red with power as it used its innate skill to increase its power even further. Its black fur began to turn red as flames spontaneously erupted from its body. It banged its chest again, and with each slam its fiery fur roared with it. It immediately lunged towards Rena, its giant fists balled up in flames and its fangs turning as orange as magma. The monster tried to grab Rena, but she swung both of her scimitars and created a crescent made out of pure earth mana to deflect it away from her, giving her enough time to dodge away. Its fists crashed towards a tree and immediately turned part of the tree burnt black. Rena squatted down and closed her eyes before jumping up in the air, her scimitars crossed on her chest. Just then, red dust started to flow around her like strings. There wasn't a magic circle anywhere on her body, meaning that those red dust weren't made out of mana at all. It's her ability, Michael realized. And it was at that moment that that same red dust started to gather above Rena's head. These dust began to coagulate and form into the curvy torso similar to that of a woman's torso. The dust continued to form upwards and upwards before finally reaching the head. The dust formed the general shape of a human head before its features became molded. Michael realized that the red dust wasn't just forming one face. It was forming three faces at the same time. Three facets of a woman appeared on Rena's diva. They all looked like they were the same woman, but their expressions were completely different. The one at the front showed a serious and solemn expression. The one on the right showed a happy and smiling face. And the one on the left showed a combination of anger and sadness. Once her diva had formed, more and more red dust surrounded Rena. And as she started to rotate in the air, the red dust continued to rotate with her, forming a sort of galaxy disc shape that spun as fast as a top. Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today.